everybody? Welcome to another episode of Purple Insider presented by FanDuel. Matthew Coller here, and out of practice today. I thought that I might come back with a heavy padded practice, lots of battling it out, fighting it out, lots of notes, lots of breakdowns, and I was wrong. It was not a very exciting practice. It really was more walkthrough style again for the Vikings. They did some stuff, but not enough to track and bring you back a bunch of notes. It wasn't in pads, so the individual performances, well, I could tell you that at the end of practice, Ty Felton made a nice catch in the back of the end zone on 7-on-7s. When there's no pads, it's really not that relevant of information that happened today. Although he did make a nice catch from J.J. McCarthy in the back of the end zone, but we've gone far past that point where we're trying to analyze and break things down, I think, from practices that are in shells. So we'll see about tomorrow, but that does not mean there's no notes or nothing to talk about. In fact, the cup overflows with things to discuss, from new uniforms to a player suspended to Brian Flores with a lot to say about different players on the defense. So that's where we're going to start. And by the way, I promised that I would have NFC Power Rankings, and I have NFC Power Rankings. And there was much debate up on the hill today as we were watching the Vikings only kind of practice between the different reporters going back and forth, and we came to a list that feels pretty good, and I will reveal that to you shortly. But I want to start out with Brian Flores and his first opportunity to talk about Caleb Banks, since Banks has been in a couple of games, and he had some interesting things to say. So we'll start right out with Flores on Caleb Banks.
But Caleb's doing a real nice job. I think he's improving. The one thing about him is, he works, and it's important to him. He works, and in my experience, guys who work at it and continually try to improve, they improve and develop. And so I think he and really the rest of the rookie group's doing a good job.
So Flores there, I don't think that he backed away at all from the fact that Caleb Banks has had some good and bad moments so far in the preseason, and it has not been any sort of explosive preseason for Caleb Banks. He didn't run over people left and right and look like an instant superstar, but he has shown some flashes, and I think what he said right there is just that they like the effort. And even from game one to game two, it was better than it was in the first game for Caleb Banks. But I think once again sort of speaks to the patience that's going to be required with Caleb Banks. And I also think that if Flores felt like people were being too harsh or they were just flat out wrong from the analysis of Banks in his first two games, he would probably come out and say it there, but instead just said, look, I'm very happy with the effort that he's putting in. And every time we've heard him talk about Caleb Banks, I've come back to the same conclusion, which is patience is probably going to be required throughout this season. Now, Banks did say something after the game, and he's got a good sense of humor, and he is a friendly guy and kind of jokes around a little bit. And so I'm not entirely sure, but I think that he was kind of just being jovial when he talked about like needing to run gassers and get in shape. And they really put him through a lot last week to try to get him up to football shape. But Flores did talk about those comments, which I saw went more viral than they probably should have. So here's what Flores had to say about that.
So he's right that he's he may not feel like he's in the best of condition, but I'm not sure he really even knows what that looks like, just like any other rookie. And there's no way, I don't blame him for that. It's something he's going to have to learn on the fly. He's gotten a little bit of a feel for it in these preseason games, what the first half looks like, what starting the third quarter looks like. And that's the same for, Orange, it's the same for Golday, it's the same for Chuck D, it's the same for Jacob Thomas. And so, again, with these rookies, it's there's no way for them to, step in and think that they're going to, have the experience to really know what NFL football is like. I think he's right to feel like, hey, I'm not where I need to be, and I don't think he'll really know until we're really in it.
And I generally agree with that from Brian Flores, that all rookies have to actually get onto the field and play real games before they know what they're going to go through. And that's why everybody talks about, players learning to take care of their bodies. So I've got more from Flores, But let's take a minute to just talk about those two comments specifically and how they pertain to Banks. Now, I think when it comes to his conditioning, that is going to be something that they are working through the entire season, because what I've learned over the years is that if you have an off-season injury, it does matter. I mean, think about, I had a conversation with Will Fries at the beginning of this training camp, and Fries told me I was never right last year, coming off the injury, didn't have the entire training camp, and was playing from behind that entire season last year. He wasn't in as good a shape as he could have been, and while he played 17 games, he played in some pain and battled through, and it was a difficult year for him. And we saw the same thing for Christian Darrisaw. I mean, even going back, the one that stands out to me is when the Vikings signed Latavius Murray initially, and this is going way back to 2017, but I remember he had some sort of ankle issue or something, and it was totally blown off. Oh, it's no big deal. It's just a little ankle. He's all right. He's going to miss a couple of weeks of camp. It'll be fine. And it took until about halfway through the season until he had his total burst back. So with Caleb Banks coming off of this foot injury, when he talks about getting in shape and so forth, and Flores is kind of saying like, hey, none of these rookies really know what it's going to be like when they get out there. But I think that does have a significant impact in how up to par you can get with your body, and it's going to take time. So the way that I would like to look at Caleb Banks is, does he progressively get more reps, get more snaps? Does he progressively look like he is, in better shape, not from trying to judge his body necessarily, but like just from watching him the other day at the game? I thought, and I even wrote in my little recap, like it looks like by the end of this thing, he's pretty worn down. So by week 5, by week 7, by week 10, does it look like he is in better shape as the season is going along? But it's not an easy thing to try to get in shape on the fly while you're learning to play this position. And that's why patience continues to be the word. And I also think that, Flores is totally understanding of rookies and how long they take to develop. And when we look at the other players on the defensive line, he was preaching the same sort of stuff last year with guys like Levi Drake Rodriguez and Ty Ingram Dawkins of they're workers, they care about football, and if they do that, it's going to work in the long run. But I think all the signals, and I was curious today if Flores would come out and tell us, like, I don't know what you guys are talking about. He is dominating out there. You guys have no idea about football. Because, they usually will be aware of a narrative about a player and will try to steer it in the right direction most of the time. And I think with Flores, when we go back to the Dallas Turner stuff from 2 years ago, he was steering us toward this same sort of thing. Like, be patient, he'll get there. The conversations he had with Dallas Turner about, getting his body in shape and things like that. There's a lot to learn for rookies. So I'm sure there will be maybe some disappointment early on from you draft a guy in the first round. There's a lot of discussion about it, but you don't necessarily see him getting 50 snaps a game. But there was nothing today that changed my mind. In fact, I think it more of confirmed the amount of patience that I've been talking about is going to be required with Caleb Banks off the jump. Now, when we talk about players who have been developed and have taken a jump this year, Ty Ingram Dawkins is one of them. And today, Brian Flores really raved about Ty Ingram Dawkins.
I like his approach to the game. I think he's really, there's a focus, there's an attention to detail, there's an urgency, whether he's, playing outside on the edge, whether he's inside, whether he's playing, third down situations, early down. I think there's a focus, attention to detail, an urgency to get it right, to do it well, to do his job, to help the team in any way. I just think he's taken a big leap just from I hate to use the word maturity, then we're going to say he was immature. That's not really what I'm saying, but just from a professional standpoint from year 1 to year 2. I was actually talking to his parents about it the other day. There's just this growth that it's fun to see as a coach. That's what we're in this for.
And that's when you could tell that Brian Flores is legitimately happy with the player right there and their progress. Just specifics about the areas that he's improved with Ty Ingram Dawkins, and he's gotten a ton of playing time during this training camp. He's been the most often cited guy from teammates when it comes to asking like, hey, who's getting better? And I asked Levi Drake Rodriguez about him yesterday, and he said like his amount of comfort is so much greater this year, and he's playing so much faster this year, Ty Ingram Dawkins, and we're starting to see that. So as on one side of the spectrum, there probably will be a little bit of, hey, where is Caleb Banks? Why isn't he getting more work? I am very intrigued when the season begins how far along Ty Ingram Dawkins and Levi Drake have really come because of the way people are talking about them. And normally when Flores talks this way about a player, something good is on the other side. We've seen that from a lot of guys, like Josh Metellus comes to mind and so forth. So let me get you some other notes from TCO Performance Center today. Jayshon Jones will be suspended for the first 3 games of the season. The Star Tribune reports that he was arrested in April for refusing a breath test. So not exactly what you want when you're Jayshon Jones and you are fighting to be on the cusp of the roster. But I severely doubt that there's going to be any impact on the Minnesota Vikings to not have him as very likely a practice squad player. I've liked his training camp quite a bit. I think that he has caught just about everything as he has in previous years. And Jones has showed up at times in the preseason, although we've seen more of Ty Felton with the big bomb or Miles Price, who's looked really, really good as a development project. Jayshon Jones lives in a space in the NFL that's a really tough place to be, which is that fringe 6th or 7th guy, the guy that makes the practice squad, but it's really hard to make the actual roster. And, all summer long, Tristan Jackson has been out there coaching, and he was the ultimate example for me of a guy who was a very, very good football player, but not quite enough. And I feel like Jayshon Jones falls into that same category. But if you are that guy, then you got to be like Tristan Jackson, which is a great, great teammate. Everybody loves to be around, work your butt off. And I'm not saying that those aren't true for Jayshon Jones, but off the field matters too. So not a good look for him, but I don't think he was going to make the roster anyway. We'll see if he ends up on the practice squad. They do have some other guys like Dylan Bell, like Dante Fleming. How many wide receivers will they keep? He's kind of the veteran guy, even though he hasn't gotten in actual games, but knows the offense and could potentially be the guy who bumps up. I doubt this will have any sort of bearing on his status as a practice squad player because they wouldn't likely have any thoughts of playing him over the first 3 weeks of the season. But notable enough that if you're the fringe guy, having an arrest that gets you suspended, even if they did want to put you on the team, even if they did need to throw you out there because of a rash of injuries, they can't do it, which I'm sure the team does not love. So at practice today, I mentioned light practice, some 7-on-7 red zone stuff, not enough to really track and talk about, which player did this or that. But Max Brosberg did get quite a bit of work today. And I think that he is going to end up playing a lot. I almost said starting, but I'm not sure because Carson Wentz also took some second team reps. JJ McCarthy and Kyler Murray did red zone stuff. And the question is, for the game against the Denver Broncos is, will JJ McCarthy play in this game? I think the fact that he is banged up and he didn't look the smoothest today or sharpest, or maybe a combination of both those words when it came to his movements. He looked like a little bit stiff, maybe a little bit still dealing with what happened in the game when he took some big hits. So I don't know if they want to put him out there. Generally, the third preseason game has been for essentially the third teamers only. Normally, even the second team guys, like I'm not even sure you play Ty Felton or Miles Price. Personally, I wouldn't. I would not play those guys because those guys have to play in real games. Felton is going to be, I think, a deep threat potentially, and he's going to be maybe the second kick returner, and he's going to be a punt gunner. Like, you need those roles. You can't get guys like that hurt, and Miles Price is going to be the returner. Maybe the second team offensive line gets out there. Not sure about that, but I could see them wanting to get one last look at some of those second team offensive linemen. Would they play Carson Wentz? Because Wentz has taken so few reps throughout the summer. I mean, it wouldn't be surprising at all to play Wentz and just see how he performs in that environment. But, just get him a little more work. I mean, he's mostly just been kind of throwing off to the side, doing the individual drills and things like that all summer long as they went through the quarterback competition. Does he want to get a little bit more of a ramp up, or is even Carson Wentz going to sit on the sideline and watch Max Brosmer? The fact that they haven't brought in another quarterback at this point, like normally you would think that you would bring one in if you were going to, have somebody else be the backup. So I guess if I'm guessing now, I would say Wentz would start and then turns it over to Max Brosmer after like a quarter and lets Brosmer take it the rest of the way. We will see. If McCarthy's not at 100%, then there's no chance that I would start him. But I do think if he is 100%, you would prefer to see more. He has had a pretty tough 2 games in the preseason, but I think that even the off chance that he could have somebody else fall into him or something and injure anything on a guy that could have to play, probably not. Like, this is entirely for tryout dudes, forming that practice squad, maybe the last guy on the 53, number 53 out of 53, maybe when it comes to those things. But I don't think we're going to see a whole heck of a lot of the starters. I did not put this on my notes, and I should have on the little graphic here, but I'll just mention it as part of the notes, that the Vikings did part ways with Dwight McGlothern. So they decided to waive McGlothern, and he was a guy that looked like from the beginning that he had a lot of potential. Lanky playmaker, got his hands on the football a lot, made the team a couple of times, and was in the locker room, just never really got on the field too much. And you thought that, like, hey, this could be an undrafted free agent that they kind of steal and ends up being a really important depth player, or maybe even ends up a starter someday after a couple of years of development. And it just did not come to fruition. And this has kind of been the case for a few undrafted free agents. Ivan Pace Jr. looked the part early on. Gabe Murphy was another guy who in practices was doing really well. They were talking him up, and we were talking about how, hey, they find a bunch of UDFAs. How amazing is this? And then there's been some other guys like Bo Richter who have made the team, made an impact on special teams. I think we could see a lot of Tyler Batty this year, potentially in a rotational role in special teams. Chaz Chambliss, another guy too, but those guys that we kind of hyped up a lot have just really not come to fruition too often. And Dwight McGlothern is a poster boy for that, of someone who looked like there was some real potential there, but you just wonder about the technical, the coaching. Like, was he taking the coaching? Because he had the physical ability to stay with wide receivers and make plays on the football. Just maybe the details of that did not play out the way that they had necessarily expected. In terms of also in the secondary, Theo Jackson did not practice, but the way that Flores kind of ran through the safety depth today, it just didn't sound like there's anything serious with Theo Jackson. We'll hear from Kevin O'Connell tomorrow. I imagine that he'll give an injury report. And as Flores was talking about the safety unit, he kind of went through the guys and he left out Jay Ward. And then he said, well, I should mention Jay, but I think of him as a nickel. And that's where he's been playing for the entire offseason in training camp, is he has been a nickel corner, kind of that big nickel role. But that really confirms what we've seen out there, is that, Jay Ward is going to be that big nickel spot. And we know that Metellus is going to be in a traditional safety position. And then we'll see between Theo Jackson and Jacob Thomas. I think it's going to be Theo Jackson. I think that he's going to go toward the veteran player. But there have been other instances where, they have gone towards somebody that we didn't necessarily expect. And that kind of happened with Ivan Pace a couple years ago, but I still expect that to be Theo Jackson. Might just depend if he's good to go for week 1. And also, it's always good when you can get a little confirmation, just a little confirmation about something you thought, from somebody like Brian Flores. He was asked about Dallas Turner, and he said, he really played great against the Ravens in those joint practices against very good competition. So that just confirms previous reporting. Not that I thought there was a chance that was wrong, but Dallas looked really, really good in those joint practices. And that's, what the coaches care about the most out of the entire offseason. And I think that it may have some predictive measure for Turner, turning the corner, if you will. So there's some notes for you, but they also wanted to throw on a light note. The Vikings launched a new rivalry uniform today, as some other teams did. And I had a chance to stand next to the mannequin at TCO Performance Center and take one of the best photos of my life, I think, with little finger gun action there with with the Justin Jefferson mannequin. I appreciate the mannequin, stepping in and being willing to take the photograph with me. Now, I have heard a lot of opinions and read a lot of opinions from folks on these uniforms. I will say that I am not the perfect guy to ask this question. In general, I like any uniform that happened before 2000. I mean, I like creamsicles from Tampa Bay. I like the Seattle Seahawks ones that are blue and with the silver helmet. I like the throwbacks for a lot of teams. I like the throwbacks for the Vikings, honestly. The ones that are like long. If it was me, I'd put them in the longer sleeves with the rings around the arm, and they would be that color purple and everything else. Many folks have pointed out that it does have a Baltimore Ravens type of tone to it, or tint to it. But I think in terms of the overall uniform, I read Lindsey Young's article. They put a lot of effort into it, and it looks pretty snazzy. Is that a good word to describe it? You guys will have to tell me what your opinions are on the new uniform. But I mean, I don't think it's going to distract from the game. There are some of the other ones that I was like, Jacksonville Jaguars, what are you thinking? They look like Coastal Carolina. So, I think this is fine. It's kind of sharp. It doesn't look like the purple grape ones, which I never had a problem with, but some folks did not really enjoy those from, what were they called? The Coller Rush. People did not like the Coller Rush. I think this is pretty sharp, but wanted to show you guys that photo. And I'll get you a couple other notes here. And then at the top of the hour, I answer some questions and thoughts on today's notes and so forth. And then I will run through at the top of the hour NFC Power Rankings. So this came out from Jordan Schultz today that Hassan Reddick is the latest pass rusher, quote, drawing interest from teams after recent signings, including Von Miller, Zadarius Smith, and Derek Barnett. And he says the 31-year-old has 61.5 sacks and spent last season with Tampa Bay. So we can pretty properly read into this that the agent for Hassan Reddick is like, can you give me a hand here and put this out here, because we're trying to get Hassan a couple of more dollars, and let everybody know that there is interest in Hassan Reddick. Well, from my perspective, I'm interested in Hassan Reddick for the Minnesota Vikings. He has played outside linebacker before. He's been a pure pass rusher before. He could drop back in coverage if you ask him to do that. He can really be a backup to Dallas Turner, but also another rusher. I wonder about whether Hassan Reddick would be comfortable with the idea of not playing very much, because Dallas Turner and Andrew Van Ginkel are going to play, and you would be the rotational player, but maybe more just a backup. On third downs, you might be rushing up the middle. You might be rushing off the edge to have Van Ginkel drop back in coverage or something like that. I saw a stat today that Van Ginkel dropped back in coverage like 35% of his total snaps. So, that offers someone like Eric Wilson a chance to rush the passer. Would Hassan Reddick want to do that? I mean, I think we all agree that a backup edge rusher would be nice for the Minnesota Vikings and maybe necessary for them. And we've been talking about that and banging that drum for quite some time. But if you're Hassan Reddick, I think maybe something that you're waiting for is, does an edge rusher get hurt and you've got an opportunity to play 600 or 700 snaps? Maybe at 31 years old, he doesn't want to, but that's not that ancient. I think someone like Leonard Floyd, who's a little older than that, might want a limited snap count, but somebody like Reddick may still believe that he could be a starting player. So I don't know if the Vikings will get in the mix for him, but putting this out here, the blowhorn of, hey, everybody, Hassan Reddick's looking for a contract. Maybe the Vikings can give him a call and see if he's interested, because I do think with Dallas Turner, do you want to ask him to play every single snap of the game, or would you rather have him play, like, let's say that there's 60 snaps. How about like 48 of them, and then have Reddick come in for a handful of snaps as well, handful of third down rushes, just allow him to kind of go after the quarterback. But it's, if you're him and you want to play, this might not be the place because they are pretty locked in with their starters. Also, Jordan Schultz had another scoop that really surprised me, which was this. He says, sources, the Bears have had trade discussions involving defensive tackle Gervin Dexter, and there are multiple scenarios where a deal could get done sending him to a new team. Dexter is 24 years old, and anytime someone says still just 24 years old, you know where that's coming from. Has started all 17 games last season and 13 and a half career sacks, 42 QB hits, and in the final year of his rookie contract. And here's why this one is surprising. One is that Gervin Dexter has been a pain in the butt for the Vikings. He's a pretty good player, but mostly just enormous. And he's kind of been comped a little bit to Caleb Banks. And I think he's been pretty good. He hasn't been a superstar by any means, but the Chicago Bears, it feels to me like the last thing in the entire world that you would want to do if you're the Chicago Bears would be to get rid of someone on your defensive line just because their contract's coming up, or are they not happy with him and what shape he's in, or has he been beat out by some younger player on the D-line? But the Chicago Bears' big, old, massive weakness is not just regression. It's the defensive line and their ability to rush the passer. And I think if you're the Vikings, you'd be perfectly happy with them sending Gervin Dexter somewhere else because he's had some pretty big games against them in the past. So that did take me a little bit by surprise, but looks like they are shopping Mr. Dexter, and I have no idea who is going to play on the interior defensive line and make a difference there. I mean, Grady Jarrett's still there. Chicago, I think, has some serious issues when it comes to the D-line, and their secondary is being totally revamped. So as I will reveal the NFC Power Rankings later on, but I do have questions about Gervin Dexter. So we'll get to that top of the hour, but let's hear from you guys a little bit here for a little bit, and then we'll get to the NFC Power Rankings. We'll start off with I Shot You 99. Do you like the rivalry jerseys? So for me, I think that they look sharp. I think that they look like that they put work into it with the design, and it's kind of that darker gold and it's like a darker purple. And if it didn't look exactly like the Ravens, we probably would say, oh, well, this is going to be different. But anytime you have a rivalry jersey, there's a main place that you need to begin with, which is don't embarrass yourself. I mean, the ones that the Bills rolled out are insane. Like that looks like Boise State, I don't know, ran into the Buffalo Bills. Like it's that one, and Coastal Carolina being the Jacksonville jersey. Don't embarrass yourself. Don't be hysterical in front of the internet. And I definitely don't think they did that. And I think that when you see, as I stood next to it out on the field, guys running around, I mean, I think it's going to look really sharp. It's a hard balance because you don't want to go too out there with that type of jersey, but you also want to make it different. And, you know, the internet never likes almost anything, but I mean, I think just in general, it's good. It'll look fine. I think when you actually see it out on the field, but you're always putting yourself out there as a franchise when you release a new jersey because it has to be different, but it also can't be completely wacky. I think it is different, and I do not, think it's wacky. But I'm curious about your guys' opinions. Let me know what you think. If you probably have stronger opinions. You guys are the ones that, buy the jerseys and stuff like that. Are you going to buy the rivalry jersey, or are you kind of I don't know. Mama says this is the part of the preseason that seems to drag forever. We need week 1 already. It gets real interesting after this. The final preseason game is a tough watch every year, and maybe there's one interesting story that pops up out of it. And then cut down day, always fascinating. We were debating 53s today, and I don't think people loved, and by people, I just mean other reporters, as we were kind of comparing. I don't think they loved me putting Zamiah Vaughn on the list. They kind of thought, well, it's probably going to be 4 corners. And then, Isaiah Loudermilk's over with the first team. And it's is Isaiah Loudermilk going to be on the team? A lot of haggling there. So we'll get the answers to that. And last year proved to us that sometimes big and surprising moves can happen on cutdown day, after cutdown day. The Harrison Phillips trade, total shocker last year. And, they added Adam Thielen last year, which was a whole thing that went on over, a number of days and so forth. And so, there could be additions and changes, and that's always exciting to see the like final touches that are put on a roster. And then we finally get to week 1. But you're right, Mama. I mean, we've seen the preseason, enough preseason football probably for a lifetime these last 2 weeks. I mean, could they at least have been fun? Like, they were just not fun at all. There were some other teams that were playing like games that are 34-28 or something. We got none of that. No entertainment at all. Do something Teasley from Joker. Yep. And even if it's not Hassan Reddick or Leonard Floyd, because they're looking to play, maybe even just somebody else that's around the league somewhere, someone that they like, who just does that as a job. Because right now they really don't have someone who does it as a job to be a pure pass rusher, and I think you need that. Jims is not sure about the new uniforms. They remind me of the Ravens. Yeah, I mean, that's a very common thing, is that most people have said that, they remind them of the Ravens with the tone. It is a tone that the Ravens have always kind of had. And so I don't disagree with you that the purple is the Baltimore type of purple. Baltimore has the black pants, right, that it goes with that. So I can see it, but at the same time, like, what would you have done maybe differently? So they've done the whiteout ones. Those are all white. They've done the uber purple ones that look like a grape, and I was fine with them, but they with the offensive linemen, those other ones that were super, super purple kind of looked funny. And, now I think everybody's going to look pretty sharp. So you guys will have to let me know if some of you like them or not. Thomas, I didn't come here for the football news. I want to know how your back is feeling today. Well, that is a good reminder, actually, which I should stop and talk about our sponsor. Thank you. I appreciate that reminder. The back is doing better. Yeah, the back is doing better. There were a few days there early in training camp from standing out there for 3 hours that were pretty tough. And just to overshare, I did have to have an MRI on my back, and I'm okay. But that anyone who's ever had an MRI, it's not a fun time. But since you asked, let me remind you of our sponsor, which is Brooklyn Bedding. And I do have these back issues, but let me tell you what's made it a heck of a lot better, which is my Aurora Lux mattress from Brooklyn Bedding. I was having so much trouble sleeping, so much pain in the back until we changed mattresses, and it's really been a life changer. And you can tell their mattress is made so well. It feels solid, intentional. It is made right here in the USA, and yet still cost effective, and but built for the long term with great craftsmanship. This isn't just some hunk of foam that they sent to my house. The Aurora Lux mattress is outstanding, but they have tons of different types for all sleep styles, all body types. You can find exactly what you want for you. I know what I was looking for, the kind of medium between super hard, super soft, and it's worked out just great. An afternoon nap before the show works out pretty well as well, but I wake up every day with a ton of energy. And Brooklyn Bedding also gives you a 120-night comfort trial. If you aren't comfortable, you can swap the mattress or return it hassle-free. So go to brooklynbedding.com and use my promo code PURPLE to get 30% off site-wide. That is the promo code PURPLE, brooklynbedding.com. 30% off is a lot. And let me give you a quick FanDuel question of the day, which is the Vikings are 6.5-point underdogs against the Denver Broncos. Not a high expectation for the Vikings in this game from FanDuel, but what's the last thing you're looking for? The last thing you're looking for from preseason is the Vikings are 6.5-point underdogs on FanDuel. All right, let's get back to your questions. And in a couple minutes, I did say at the top of the hour, so maybe I should just do it right now. And then we'll get back to your questions. I promised power rankings, and I want to give you power rankings. So let's go take a look here. NFC Power Rankings, and these were vetted by my colleagues today. And I promised to do NFC Power Rankings every once in a while. I think we said like once a month, but nothing really happened in June or July was just starting training camp. So now we have training camp information from the Minnesota Vikings, training camp information from all the other teams in the NFL, and I am unveiling officially my NFC Power Rankings, and maybe I'll do one more right before the season, but we've got a lot of information. We know what injuries have happened. We know what narratives have happened around the league, so I'm going to go one by one here and explain them, and then you guys can react to those as well. So number 1 is the Los Angeles Rams. That has not changed, probably won't. Seattle, number 2. Those two teams are the clearest best teams in the NFC. The Rams stockpiling their defense. They have the MVP quarterback, and the Seattle Seahawks coming off a Super Bowl. They have lost some talent, and they did lose their offensive coordinator, but they also still have a lot of talent on the defensive side, and one of the best receivers in football, and a Super Bowl winning quarterback who you're familiar with, and so forth. So they deserve benefit of the doubt there. I decided, and this was one of the hardest ones to go with, I decided to go with the Philadelphia Eagles at number 3, and the confidence level is not super duper high. They don't have A.J. Brown anymore. They do have a new offensive coordinator. Saquon Barkley is another year older, but they still have Devontae Smith. They have added some weapons, young guys in the draft, and I think that their defense is going to be one of the best. Vic Fangio, their defensive coordinator. I am giving benefit of the doubt to the Philadelphia Eagles as the third best team in the NFC. I decided to go with number 4 as the Detroit Lions. Now, I could understand a gripe with this pick because last year the Vikings beat the Lions twice. The Lions had lots of issues with their offense when dealing with Brian Flores' pressure. They also missed the playoffs. But here is my thinking. Last year is not this year. There is a different schedule that the Lions are going to face, which has a lot of games that look pretty winnable for them. As the last place schedule. They also had the best point differential in the NFC North last year, despite finishing last, which almost never happens and was kind of emblematic of them losing some weird games. They have a new offensive coordinator who I think is going to vastly improve from their last one. There's still questions with their offensive line. There's still questions with their defense, but they have the most blue chip talent in the NFC North. So I'm putting them 4th. This is this year's. It's not last year's. It's not what it looked like in 2025. I think this year the Lions have the best chance to win the division. They also do have the best odds on FanDuel to win the division as well. Not that I was doing it based on the betting market, but that's what folks are thinking there. I went with the Vikings 5th, which is the highest ranking that I have had the Vikings in any of these NFC Power Rankings, and I will explain. What we've seen from the defense has been better than I expected during training camp. Some of the development projects who have come to fruition so far, some of the players who have stepped up, some of the draft class players. I think Jake Golday has looked really good in camp and in preseason. Charles Demmings has looked like he's ready to play. I think their depth is better. And also, while Kyler Murray has not every single day of every single practice looked like Peyton Manning, he has played pretty well during training camp. He's had some really strong days. I think he's locked into the offense very well, maybe even better than we thought he would in terms of his command of the offense. His connection with Jefferson has been great. The weapons, the line is healthy. Health is a big part of this. They still have Brian Flores. The running game is something everybody's talking about. I was even having a conversation today for a story with Keenan McCardle, the Vikings receivers coach, and he was saying, we're all feeling about the run game that it's going to be better and maybe give Justin Jefferson more opportunities for one-on-ones. So I think a lot of things have played out really well for the Vikings, and I have them as now 5th. 6th, Chicago Bears, maybe splitting hairs between the two, but it really comes down to, especially if they're getting rid of Gervin Dexter, the amount of players that they lost in the offseason, the lack of pressure that they brought in, the potential regression, and with Caleb Williams, that's what it's really going to come down to, is how much better he can get. I still think they'll be a good team because of Ben Johnson, because of the weapons they have, but I don't know that they're going to be first in the NFC North. So 3 straight NFC North teams. Number 7 is the number 6 is the Chicago Bears. Number 7 is the Dallas Cowboys. And I do think that the Cowboys have an improved defense, getting a new defensive coordinator. We know how much that can change things. And their offense is one of the best in the NFL. Green Bay is after that. So now I have Green Bay last in the division. I just think it's been a bad offseason for Green Bay. We don't know what's going on exactly with Josh Jacobs, if there's going to be a suspension at some point, but he didn't play that well last year at times. Their coach, I think, is really under a ton of pressure. Their offensive line has not gotten much better. I think Jordan Love is a very, very good quarterback, but when there are thin margins and your defense got worse and did not improve in the offseason, and you don't have Micah Parsons potentially for, 6 weeks, and then he's got to come back. And we saw what happened with, TJ Hawkinson when he had to come back mid-season from an ACL. The Packers are a little harder to buy now at this point. The Commanders I have is 9th. I could see their ceiling being higher with the defensive ads that they've made. Not only the power station, but the prostitution issue with their owner, a little bit concerning from an offseason, but they have so many players hurt. There's just been a lot of drama around the San Francisco 49ers. They're trying to answer by bringing back Deebo Samuel. I still think that they have a good quarterback and a great coach, but I don't know that they're going to make the playoffs. So I have the 49ers 10th. Tampa Bay winning the NFC South as the 11th best team is the most NFC South thing of all time, but that's what I have. Tampa Bay 11th, Carolina 12th. I think that's a real battle between those two. The Giants 13th. I bumped down New Orleans because of Jordan Tyson getting banged up. I think they're really going to need him, and he's dealing with some hamstring issues. So they are 14th, and we'll see on Tyler Shuck. Not really totally convinced on the ceiling there. And the Falcons 15th. Penix is back. I think he's actually probably going to start. And the Arizona Cardinals, hands down 16th. They will probably not move from that spot all year long in the NFC Power Rankings. But there you have it. I promised them when there wasn't that big of a practice, and there you go. And we'll, if there's not a big practice tomorrow, we'll come up with something else to rank as well. So there you go, NFC Power Rankings. All right, back to your questions and comments and thoughts, and jerseys and power rankings, and we got things going on here this evening. Blantos says first rounders coming off serious injuries becoming too common, concerning for us. Well, yeah, Lewis Cine got hurt in the NFL, and so did JJ McCarthy. Caleb Banks was in college. But you're right that, those injuries have all been a factor. I mean, we'll never really know with Lewis Cine how much it mattered, but his injury was not just like, oopsie, there's a broken toe, it'll heal. I mean, it was a horrible, horrible injury for Lewis Cine, and you never know how that might impact somebody mentally. And physically, supposedly he was fine, but mentally it may have had an impact on how aggressive you feel like you can be. And we all just assume these are super soldiers, but they are real people. So we kind of go, well, did Cine really love football, or what was it this, or was it that, or, could it have been the injury? And McCarthy, I think we know that that's really the big bang moment for how we got here, is him having that injury. He was on a good trajectory, and it's very possible that he never would have come to fruition anyway, but still would have really liked to have seen how it would have looked had he had an entire year behind the scenes, never had that injury, and just got to work. With Caleb Banks, it's a little bit different than those because he's not going to miss any time. It's just going to take a little longer for him to be in a position where we start to see the real version of Caleb Banks, because this guy didn't play a lot of football in 2025 either, only a couple of games, and he was always coming off injuries. So you're right, though. I mean, these have real world impacts, and I think for Banks, it's just a setback for him to have that at the combine, but it should not, assuming that he doesn't have the injury again, it should not be crushing to his rookie year. It might just start off slower. I think that that's what I'm trying to prepare everyone for, is that it's just going to start off with not as many reps as you would have thought on draft night, where it's like, oh, that's who they're replacing Javon Hargrave with. Well, not really. That's going to be more of like, Ty Ingram Dawkins and Levi Drake Rodriguez. Brady, we've never really seen Jefferson Addison scramble drills in real games. Are we thinking the short mid-range passing game with scramble drills and I formation? Could it look like Russell Wilson, you mean? Yeah, running I formation, play actions, and then deep shots and scramble drills. You're right about that, though. That's a good observation. They did a little bit with Sam Darnold, but it wasn't a ton, and they certainly did not do that with Kirk Cousins. So that will be fascinating. I haven't seen him practice it a whole lot. I mean, maybe it's something they do in their individual drills a little bit, but that will be like getting on the same page when Kyler Murray scrambles for all those guys. I would say Juwan Jennings has a lot of experience with this because Brock Purdy loves to scramble, loves to make plays out of structure. So he might be a guy that is a little more familiar with how that works. I do think that the short and mid-range passing game is going to be really big for them. I've seen more slants than we usually see. I've seen more quick outs than we usually see. And those are throws that Murray's really good at, especially that quick out, like 7-yard. He hit one today, and I know 7-on-7, no pads, but he hit one today to TJ Hawkinson. It was just go up, out in a red zone drill and hits him right on the money, right in the hands. I mean, he's really good at that throw to the sideline to get you 7-8 yards. So we probably will see that a lot. And then they do have to build off the run game. It's extremely important to be able to have that big formation. And if you do run like a play action, one of the great things about Murray is that he could just scramble for 8 to 10 yards if there's nothing there. And you kind of get him into some space so he can see down the field. So yeah, I mean, I think that what we are seeing is Kevin O'Connell in even training camp where they're not game planning or anything, but they are installing stuff, put in things that make sense for Kyler Murray. And that was always a question as we were going into this part of the year was, well, how much will Kevin O'Connell adapt his offense? And my expectation was that he would. Like, this is somebody who has a breadth of knowledge of football that none of us are anywhere remotely close to. Played in the NFL on the same team as Tom Brady, coached as a quarterback coach, offensive coordinator for McVay. Like, the idea that he would just be like, nah, I'm not doing nothing. I never really bought that. So, but I think we have seen some adaptations there, but I'll be fascinated. I didn't really think of that too much, but you can't really figure out how they're going to look in that scramble drill until you actually get out there and start playing games. There's no way to simulate that in training camp. And that's why I also think that whatever we've seen from Murray in trying to evaluate and grade his training camp, well, he hasn't been running, which is a really big part of Kyler Murray and who he is. So that adds a different dimension to it. I mean, 2024, he threw for 3,800 plus and ran for almost 600. So that's a lot that we haven't really been able to grade or anything. East Coast Minnesota Mark says, I would have thought the college level understands conditioning and strength more than the NFL because that's the ultimate goal to reach. I mean, yeah, they have like great facilities and stuff like that, and they have strength and conditioning coaches. It's just a different level to it. I mean, once you get to the NFL, you are playing people who are so much better and so much stronger for 60 minutes than you were in college. Now, you could take a couple of plays off and probably still succeed in college at any position. You have full games off in college. You're playing state and it's like, whatever, man, just show up to the game and you're going to win. But that never happens in the NFL, even against the worst team in the entire league. The Vikings lost to the worst team in the league once in the Detroit Lions when they were, 0-11-1, but they still had enough talent of NFL players. And I think that's kind of the point, is that nobody who comes from college can possibly predict in their mind what it's really like to go up against one of the best one of the best 32 right guards or one of the best 32 left tackles or whatever for 60 minutes. It takes so much more. So you do have to take it to another level when you come to the NFL. And the guys who do is like Dallas Turner. I mean, it took a couple of years, but when I was talking to Christian Darrisaw the other day, I was like, is he stronger? And he was like, yes, definitely. I mean, he's not even 24 years old yet, but like it does take time. And that's the other thing too, is that in terms of your actual man strength, I don't think you get that until probably, mid 20s for a lot of these guys. And I think it's one of the reasons why Brian Flores is always pretty patient when it comes to that. Matt Varick says, is defensive end depth more likely to come from a free agent signing or cut down from another roster? Yeah, I mean, there's only really a couple guys left. Now that Derek Barnett has found a home, they didn't bring back Zadarius Smith. He's probably still going to be good, I would bet, Zadarius Smith. That guy just knows how to get after the passer and was never really the greatest athlete to begin with. He's just super insanely strong. His motor's crazy. It would have been sort of fun if he came back. But I think that cut down day does actually make sense, because if we're putting ourselves in the shoes of Hassan Reddick, and who knows, like he could sign during the show. That happens sometimes, or the minute that I end the show. If that happens, we'll return and do a new live show. But with someone like Hassan Reddick, they might just want to play. They might have a thought of, let me find a spot where I could play. Because if you're the Vikings, you've got to be paying attention to the free agent market this entire time. And you I'm sure, are like communicating with, agents and things like that, trying to find somebody for depth, somebody that you feel like is going to be maybe a veteran player. I'm not reporting anything there. I'm just saying, like, it makes common sense that they would always be paying attention where they could upgrade their weaknesses. And that hasn't come to fruition yet. We are kind of getting down to the final hour of bringing in any of these free agent guys. Now you can also do it. I should say you can also do it in week 2, and there's rules there about guarantees. So if you sign somebody in week 2, then you don't have to fully guarantee their contract or something like that. So, maybe that plays into it a little bit, but I don't know if you want to take it that long with some of these free agents. It feels much more like keeping an eye on who gets cut down. And if it's not going to be Reddick or Leonard Floyd, then it's probably going to be somebody else. Like, those are the only 2 names left after all these other guys, Clowney and Von Miller and so forth, have signed. It was really the deepest position by far in the entire NFL in free agency. But now a lot of those chairs have been taken up by free agents that went to teams where maybe they feel like they can play a little bit more. And it does take a specific type of guy, because this is a 3-4 outside linebacker type of system. It's not a 4-3. And so if you're Derek Barnett, you're probably looking for 4-3. That's why Floyd and Reddick would make sense. But when are they going to play? That would be if I was their agent, that would be my question. Like, you have Turner, you have Van Ginkel. Those are 60 play a game type guys. Like, when is my dude going to play? And if you're not in total desperation mode to get out there, then you might just wait and see if someone gets hurt. So I think cutdown day will be something that they pay attention to. I also think that it looks like Tyler Batty can play. I think he's one to keep an eye on, Tyler Batty, because after preseason and joint practices and so forth, I thought he's grown a lot from last year, and he can get after the passer a bit, and they might like more what they have internally than we do. They also sent Jake Golday on a blitz where he did really well. They used Eric Wilson a lot as a pass rusher, even off the edge. So we'll see. Sneedley says Dawkins will start. He's a beast. I agree. I think Dawkins has looked really, really good during this training camp. Oh, Joker's got my power rankings from previous rankings. Let's see where I changed the most. Okay, April 6th, I had the 49ers third. That is the biggest change there. I do not have them third anymore. Just after their offseason, I think it's been really tough with injuries and now drama with their owner, which I know he doesn't play tackle, but it does permeate a team. Like, drama, it adds an extra layer of stress that I think we see impact teams sometimes, but especially just the injuries and what their answers have been. That was, I think it must have been pre-draft. So 49ers have fallen the most there. The Packers have dropped a little bit. Let's see. So I had the Vikings. Well, that was before we knew what they were going to do, really, a quarterback, right? Or did they have a quarterback by April 6th? Maybe they did by April 6th, but we had no idea what Kyler was going to look like. Now we do. Going back to April, I had the Eagles much lower. That's interesting. And the Buccaneers have moved up a bit as well. And you've got my May 11th power rankings. Let's see. Where am I different now? Still 49ers are the biggest change. Yeah, 49ers are the biggest change. I think that Kyle Shanahan's as good as it gets, but he was in a car accident. Like, they've just had so much happen in their offseason, and they have not really replaced the wide receivers except for with Mike Evans, who is injured a lot. So that's my thinking. Maybe they will prove me completely wrong, but it does feel like San Francisco is kind of an every other year thing where they just have calamities. Bumba Klatt, Laken Tomlinson would be nice offensive line depth. He played wide zone in San Francisco. Yeah, I don't mind that at all, Laken Tomlinson, to bring in, because I had only 9 offensive linemen making the roster. Still don't feel super great about the backup interior linemen, with Joe Huber and Henry Bird being the guys who are on the second team. I think a veteran could be good there. And Raheem Morris would be better than Xavier Scott, despite it being 34. I don't know about that. I don't know where Raheem Mostert, not Raheem Morris, the coach. Raheem Mostert, I'm not sure about that. I mean, he does have a connection to Miami, but he has not done much lately. And Xavier Scott does not have a crazy burst or anything, but he's kind of a truck. and he can power through some guys, break some tackles, and he can really catch the football. Very smart guy, could pass protect, plays a ton of special teams. So maybe they look for an upgrade there, but I also think you need players like that on your team. And it's hard to find RB3s. Like if we went through the entire league of RB3s, how many teams have some RB3 where you're like, oh man, that guy's incredible? The funniest thing is Arizona does. That's pretty much it. Pretty much just Arizona. Let's see. BM says 3-game suspension makes it pretty much a lock that another team won't have any interest. Yeah, BM says not that I care if he got sniped. Yeah, I mean, I agree with Jayshon Jones. It's just that he has had a really good camp. I don't think that he's made a case necessarily for having a job in the starting lineup or for making the roster over Ty Felton and Miles Price, who have really shown a lot of great development under Keenan McCardle, who I think is the best wide receivers coach in the entire NFL. We just see one player after the next develop under Keenan. And, I think Jayshon Jones has developed to about his maximum, and he's a quad A type of player, but getting suspended does not help you at all. Norse Force, luckily I've never had to deal with the field sobriety because the most drinking that I do is with the yellow Gatorade. I did drop Diet Dr. Pepper because of the caffeine element of it. So I've been going with this Sprite Zero and a lot of Gatorade to stay hydrated when I'm out there. I've missed it, but the caffeine was just too much. So I've never taken a field sobriety test or been in that position, but I have heard that from legal people saying not to take it, but I don't know. I don't know if that's true because then they arrest you. Like Tony Romo. That's a story that kind of came and went, but like Tony Romo's not doing games this year, which I think will save our brains from being rattled, but like, wow, that is significant. So East Minnesota Mark says, I do want Brosmer to flourish. He needs those reps. Yeah, it was a little bit of a rough go the other day, and everything was a rough go for the offenses for Brosmer. I thought he was doing fine, but that interception was really, really rough for him. That's the tough part. Last year, he got a lot of reps in practice, and they really were developing him. And this year, he hasn't gotten any reps really at all because they had a quarterback competition. So it's a hard life to be that third or fourth quarterback where you're just not getting any work. And then they're like, hey, go play in a preseason game. Okay, great. So maybe you see that read if you had gotten more. And last year, because he was QB3, he did get a lot more on the field time than he did this year. So I think it's a little bit circumstantial. I know people will bring up like what it looked like in Seattle and so forth, but Brosmer with development, I think has a chance to be someday a QB2 for a team. If not a QB3, which you need around the NFL, as we know, that's happened before. He did come into the Giants game and play well. It's just, the speed of the game. I don't think they ever wanted him as a rookie to be able to play, but we shouldn't just completely dismiss the idea he can have an NFL career based on a couple of really hard opponents and hard situations in games that happened last year. I would like to see a little more Max Brosmer as well, but the intrigue of like maybe he'll be the next Brock Purdy is probably off the table. Norse Force says, is Jacob Thomas still getting first team reps? Yes, he was today. Now, Theo Jackson is out. So, or at least not practicing. Like, I don't know if he's out for how long. We're going to find that out when whether, O'Connell tells us, and the first injury report, which will come out like, 15 days from now or something, then we'll kind of find that out. But I think Jacob Thomas has locked himself into a job. And that's what's really interesting is, 3 weeks ago, we were kind of like, all right, there's something maybe a little bit there. And then all of a sudden it's like, whoa, this guy's getting second team reps all the time. And then, whoa, this guy's rotating in first team reps. I mean, if they didn't believe in him, they would not have him out there doing it. They would have brought somebody else in, or they would have, Tavier Thomas has been around. He's played in real games as a safety, but I think there's a real belief there from Jacob Thomas because of how quickly he's picked it up. And even Flores talked about it today. He shouted out the scout that found him and, stuff like that. Like it seems to be a real energy about him. Whether he plays, that I don't know. I think right away, probably not, but maybe they have an option for somebody to go to if they don't love how that safety room is playing out or if there's an injury. Logart says Hawk's going to have a better year this year. The injury is finally gone. I think he, like last year, looked a little more spry. The farther you are from that injury, the better. I think for everybody you would project a better year just because of who the quarterback is. I mean, Kyler Murray was very clear by now we're at the end of camp. Tomorrow is the last day that we are going to be at practices, and then they close practices and it goes into the regular season mode where we can go out there to watch stretching, and that's it. And that'll be when the first week of the season actually starts. So having seen an entire summer of practices, Kyler Murray clearly has the throwing ability, the control of the offense, and the accuracy to get somebody like TJ Hawkinson back to 60, 70 receptions, to get Justin Jefferson back to 95 to 100 receptions, to get Jordan Addison back to 60 or 70 and 800 yards or whatever it might be. Like, he has that capability. Whether he will win between 8 and 11 games, I don't know. That comes down to a lot of stuff. Comes down to health, comes down to field goals, comes down to fumbles, comes down to, all sorts of things. And you guys have seen all kinds of these seasons play out where you get 13 in 2022 because everything goes right. You get only 8 in 2021 because everything goes wrong. I mean, think about 21, how many games were right there for the taking, and they should have been like an 11 or 12 win team and it didn't work out, And so who knows which kind of season it's going to be. But, I think Kyler has shown clearly that he can consistently get the ball to people, and whether he can be consistent week to week in terms of the accuracy, how he plays against certain defenses, that's really the thing we're going to need to see. And by the way, tomorrow we'll issue, because we'll see what kind of practice it is. It may once again not be a hard practice. I mean, I think that they've accomplished everything they want to accomplish for this offseason, and they're ready to just start preparing to play the real season. But tomorrow I will release the official training camp vibe check. Okay. Very exciting time. Every year at the end of training camp, I have sort of gone through what I think of the vibe at the end of training camp, what the overall feeling was. And maybe I'll even go kind of position by position for each feeling. But there's been some right and there's been some wrong. I think 2024 was probably the most right that I've ever been, and 2025 was probably the most wrong I've ever been. Because I thought the vibes last year were outstanding. BM says Brosmer will have a chance to get some good tape and a chance of making a roster or fail miserably. I think that when it comes to Brosmer, what they're looking for is him to be on the practice squad, continue to develop, and Carson Wentz might be here for just one more year and have Brosmer after that as your quarterback 3, and you get a starter, a veteran backup. I mean, there are a lot of these guys around the league who are undrafted free agents who are, developing, and maybe they get their chance someday to be a QB2. And I think that could be Max. But I also think that Kevin O'Connell absolutely loves Max Brosmer. I think that he really, really loves his mind for the game. And I know that this doesn't matter to people on the outside, but these quarterbacks like Nick Mullins is a great example of a guy. Like, could Brosmer be a Nick Mullins? Absolutely. A good backup quarterback who can maybe win you a game or two here or there if they have to come in, but just brings a lot to the franchise behind the scenes, and it matters to them. It may not matter to, the fantasy football player who's just like, I don't ever want to see that guy, but it definitely matters to them. Norse Force, the new rivalry jerseys are absolutely amazing. Okay, that's there's an opinion you don't always see on the internet because everybody just kind of hates everything on the internet. But yeah, I mean, I think that it looks sharp if you don't worry too much about the Baltimore Ravens color being used there and you just judge it for what it is and how it's going to look. I would say it's good. And then, they did put a lot of effort into it. Mama Bo Richter update. Richter's been fine. He's had a pretty good camp. He always shows up in the preseason games, and he will be on the team. He will be a special teamer for sure, and maybe potentially get in the game as a defender if there's some injuries. I think he's kind of carved out a really nice role for himself in the NFL. Joker, isn't Ivan Pace's contract guaranteed? Might be the edge for keeping him over Jacob Roberts. Could be. I don't know if they're thinking too much about that part of it, but that could be. And also just the idea that you could get Jacob Roberts onto the practice squad. That was my lone question for the linebacker position. I also think that, there's certain parts of the roster where you're going to go special teams, special teams, special teams. And it gets a little redundant because it's like, oh, this guy, why would they keep that guy? Special teams. Why would they keep that guy? Special teams. And Pace is that way. Like, he's going to play every unit. and they need somebody who has some experience on the special teams unit, and they need some sort of leadership there with a lot of young players. And I think that would be a main reason to keep him. But it's also possible that, they could cut him. I just would be really surprised since he can play. BM says, I was out on turn in the first half of last year, seems to really turn a corner, not thinking Pro Bowler or anything, just being a problem this year would be great. Right, and a little more consistent than last year. If he puts up, he set the bar, like 8 sacks is a pretty good season for a pass rusher, but if you get to double digits and you get 60 quarterback pressures, 55 to 60 pressures, be a top 25 rusher in the league. And we could talk about the draft status or whatever. I don't really want to go through that whole thing, but more focus on just the player and what he brings. It would be a big success if they could go from Jonathan Grenard to Dallas Turner and have him, as you said, like take that step. It really wasn't until the second half of last year. And that's the hard part all the time about talking about these guys who are young is we just have to be patient, and we are not patient, and we want to call it, and we want to say this guy's a bust, or this guy's a Pro Bowler, or this guy, whatever. It's like, that's why it's so challenging to evaluate these guys from a day-to-day basis, because sometimes the light just comes on, and it really feels like the light came on for Dallas Turner midway through last season when he got that opportunity. I think maybe it was actually at Green Bay. Was it the first time? When was the first time that Grenard was out and he just stepped in and was like, oh, okay, that is a different Dallas Turner than what we saw before. Man, you can take a picture. Thank you. It was a beautiful picture. Scamping around. Rivalry uniforms are fire. The helmet is dope. I'm glad you like it. The mom of the Bills jerseys do look horrid. BM longer sleeves. Absolutely. Sam Bradford, the only player I've ever seen with those sleeves that long. Like to see the white uniforms scamping around, so the braids look snazzy. BM, I think the new alternate is great. Oh, so you guys are like really into it. Yeah, Norse Force says that's the old school Viking purple. Ravens copied the purple. Right, and I like the old school purple. It doesn't quite look the same. I don't know what those uniforms used to be made of. Like if they were made of wool or something. Like it doesn't quite look like an old sweater like the old ones did. And I love that. But yeah, the darker purple for sure is like what they used to wear back in the day. So the Ravens stole our colors. Yeah, so you could take advantage of that. Or take, I shouldn't say it that way. You could take that as like, not, hey, you took the Ravens, but more the Ravens took you, took what you did back in the day. Norris Force, Joey Porter Jr. might be available. I don't know if the Steelers are actually going to do that. I would be very surprised. It looks like they just want him to let it play out and go from there. And there's been kind of conflicting reports about Joey Porter, where some people seem to think that they are making progress. Some people seem to think that they're far away with different reports. Kind of sounds more like farther away. Look, if Joey Porter Jr. is available, you're always going to be interested, but the cornerback position, the Vikings have not been huge spenders on that. They did sign and extend Byron Murphy Jr. I'll be curious what they do with Isaiah Rodgers, but what are you kind of doing? Are you moving? Well, I guess you could. I guess you could move Murphy into the nickel and trade for Porter and give him a huge contract. It's just a little risky though, because if you're trading for him, what are you trading? When Sauce Gardner got 2 first-round picks, like what are you trading for Joey Porter Jr.? I don't think that I'm into the idea, although I like him a lot, of Nolan Teasley giving away draft capital. BM, the whiteout jerseys are the best. John says the rivalry jersey would have looked far better as black with a darker gold. Maybe. Yeah, I don't know. If you're the Vikings, do you want to go kind of into a like totally different thing? That's where I think if you're going, you don't want to go like out of the realm of what your team is. Like they're the Vikings, they're purple. It has to be purple. And are you going to go the darker shade of purple? Are you going to go a lighter shade of purple? Are you going to put a crazy little collar on it like they did in 2000, whatever it was that came out. Was that 06 that they did that? 05? When did they put those on there? But I was never a fan of that for any team. But like, if you're going to do like a different jersey, how distant do you want to be from what the team is? And when you look at, the Green Bay Packers, they went with a different tint of green that kind of looks like the Baylor Bears, and they went with a different helmet. So I guess you could have gone with kind of a different helmet as opposed to matching those three colors. But I think it's a difficult balance of, you don't want to seem crazy. Like, oh, they just went like jet black. Like what in Vikings history is jet black? You know what I mean? So you want to stay purple, but also be different. Not easy to do. Norris Force, does Dylan Bell have a chance to make the cut or practice squad? Practice squad, I think, yeah. I've liked some things that Dylan Bell has done in practice. There was a catch he could have made for Max Brosmer today that he didn't grab, but he has been, I think, explosive and catches your eye with that. There's maybe attention to detail that's going to have to improve. And he did make a couple of catches. There was a screen or quick pass where he showed his explosiveness. And when you have actual explosiveness, well, then you've got my attention, because most guys who are UDFAs, they come in and it's just not enough, right? Like maybe they were a really good college player or, whatever it might be, or they're a super raw athlete and they don't know how to use their athleticism. He clearly does. But I think route details and catching the football consistently and so forth is going to have to improve. He could be a project for Keenan McCardle going into the future, but I don't think he's going to make the roster. I think they cut him and put him on the practice squad. GTX, you are the GM right now. Yeah, take that, Teasley. GTX just fired you and made me the GM. Do you trade JJ McCarthy? This is a hard one, because if I'm the GM, because it really would depend on, well, what's someone willing to give me? If someone is willing to give me a second round draft pick or maybe even a third round draft pick, I think I would have to think pretty hard about it, because he's only under contract for one more year. And once you lose the quarterback competition and perform like this in the preseason, the odds just are not very good of longer term success with your franchise. Maybe with another team someday, but even if we look at the quarterbacks who have worked out that started their careers like this, normally it's been a long road that ends up with someone else. Like Alex Smith is the outlier there a little bit, who eventually by age 26 turned things around in terms of his accuracy after being kind of a one-speed thrower early in his career, but he's also with a very bad team in San Francisco. He's an example of someone who was drafted by their team. They stuck with him. Are you going to stick with JJ McCarthy through the long term or not? It doesn't seem like it, but at the same time, so that's the argument for moving on and trading him, is like, what are the odds that he's going to actually, become a starting quarterback for this team? Not very high. And so what, is he just going to be your backup again next year? Well, that's kind of what's happening with Anthony Richardson. I think with the number of quarterback injuries, like there's about 70 quarterbacks per year that play in the NFL. I think it's 70, somewhere around there, that start a game. If you look up just year to year, how many quarterbacks start a single game, that means that like there's only 32 teams. Everybody on the whole is on average using a backup quarterback. I know it doesn't exactly work like that, but like that's more than twice the number of teams are the players who get to start at quarterback. So there are chances to get to QB3 or QB2 with an injury. And I think you'd want to have JJ McCarthy there to be able to play for at least this year and maybe even next year as a backup quarterback, depending on what happens. And maybe there's even a quarterback competition next year if they like what they saw this year. I haven't personally seen anything to grab onto to say this is going to be different. And one thing that I will admit, I have been against the idea of trading him really the entire time. And it's come up, many times, many nights. But when he got hurt again, I did think, that's tough. That's tough that he's banged up again. And I know it's not a serious injury or anything, but can you play him without him getting hurt? If he's holding onto the ball that long, If he's throwing that inaccurately, it feels like it's kind of a circus every time he's going to go out there. Would you rather have someone more dependable? That did go through my mind, but I think I still stand on, no, I don't see any reason to give up a quarterback who could win games for you and still potentially have any type of upside into the future with his development. So I'm going to go with no. Aaron, depending on the offer. The Bears uniforms look like Syracuse completely. They do. Yeah, they do. That's what I'm saying is it's really hard. If you are a jersey designer, I'm sure we all think that we could just design the sickest uniforms. But if you're a jersey designer and they tell you, okay, well, it's got to be different and it's got to have sort of this maybe classic type of feel, but also modern. Like this is Project Runway, man. Like you got to get these, people telling you, well, you need to do this, you need to do that, you need to get it to look really, really sharp and really slick and modern and cool and have like kids want to buy it, but also make it look classic and awesome and kind of back in the day, like what? And for some, it comes out, I think, looking pretty good for the Vikings. For others, it comes out looking like a college uniform. Go Chanticleers. That's Jacksonville. Sean, the jerseys aren't perfect, but they do have some cool elements like the, is it runs on the helmet and the knotwork. Yeah, the knotwork's pretty cool. Wish they had a deeper purple in the face mask and not gold. Oh, okay, yeah. Oh, right, because that's the old school way of doing it. Yeah. Will Reichert's burner says, I think it's crazy. Some shows are claiming that McCarthy has shown flashes or improvement this offseason, specifically another YouTube channel. Yeah. I mean, I can't comment on what anyone else has said because I listen to Sam and Steve's podcasts, Sam Monson and Steve Palazzolo, not other Vikings podcasts, because I do this and talk about it all day and don't need really much more. But my own personal opinion is that it's been very, very similar to what we saw last year. But last year we were judging with a different eye. We were looking at it as, well, Justin Jefferson missed training camp and he really had a good joint practices. So like it's going in the right direction. He seemed to improve as the offseason got along, and as day after day went, he seemed to get better and better and felt like he was in a pretty good place by the end of practice, of training camp and open practices for us. And then, goes into the season and finishes off the Chicago game really, really well and has the bad Atlanta game. But I thought, well, okay, no time to panic just yet. Then the injury happens and another injury happens and you're starting from square one once again. It felt like going into this offseason because there was only 243 passes thrown. And then we get to the end of this offseason, and it's still kind of the same issues that we're talking about. It's timing, it's accuracy, it's touch on the football. He's had a lot of ones that zoom off the hand, but what we've learned is just ripping the ball really hard is great, and it looks super cool, but it's not how you need to throw the ball to get the job done a lot of times. And the concerning part of the preseason games was how slow the football came out both times. So, yeah, I mean, he's always shown flashes. There's never been a time where he did not show flashes. He showed flashes in 24, he showed flashes in 25, and he's shown flashes this year. But in the joint practice where he's having a good practice and then throws the worst pick six, it's like, well, that's kind of the definition of JJ McCarthy. So it's very hard for me to say exactly where things have changed because I've never felt like he was talentless. Like some people act like he's just the worst player and he can never be good or whatever, which is not true either. It's just that you need to have consistent enough accuracy to complete 65 to 70% of your passes. And to me, there's no belief there that he could go into a game and complete 65% of his passes. And last year he was under 60%, and I think he would be again this year if he played. Sean says, any news on if the rookie tackle will be available to play on Friday? Like to see him have a good game since the Giants game was a bit of a culture shock for him. Do you mean, are you talking about like Caleb Banks, or is there do you mean a defensive tackle? Is there a rookie tackle, offensive tackle? I'm not sure which tackle we're talking about, but if we're talking about if you're talking about like Caleb Banks, the Giants game, I don't think that they're going to play Caleb Banks and Dominique Orange, but if they do, I think it would be telling to us of where they stand with those guys, that they are looking at them like true rotation backup type players. I would be surprised if they do, though. Vikings Wild Wolves, you're still the number one Byron Burnt Toast Murphy hater. Well, that's a little bit a strange guy to not like. Now, he didn't have as good of a season last year. I think part of that was because opponents were not passing the football very much. I think the Vikings were dead last in terms of pass attempts against, and Murphy, the year before, they had a lot of opportunities as teams were chasing from behind the Vikings to get interceptions and so forth. But there's not that many times where I can really think of him being burnt like you're talking about, because normally quarterbacks don't have much time in the pocket. I can remember the Philadelphia game where there was a jump ball. That wasn't even a burnt situation. There's been jump balls where he's not made plays. I just truly can't think of that many times during his career where someone just ran by him. He's got pretty good speed. He's very good technically. I think Murphy's a good player. So I'm surprised. Like, you're the first person I think that I've ever had on the chat that just says, I can't stand that guy, because he's been pretty solid. He was very good in 24. And last year I thought maybe not as many opportunities and the numbers went down, but I guess I'm not thinking of plays where I went, oh my gosh, he just can't cover anybody. When you get the contract, the expectations rise. And so there will be more expectations for him, but the corners have done, I think, a good job overall under Brian Flores, especially Isaiah Rodgers last year coming in and Murphy. And that's why they decided to sign him. So I don't think I can get on the same page with you there. John says, nothing beats the Vikings classic uniform. I'd rather have him wear retros that Fran Tarkenton, the Purple People Eaters, wore. So I think that what they were going for here is some of that, like some of that feel, going back a little bit with the purple, with the darker type, or I'm not sure what exactly technically purple it is. I think that that's what they were trying to have kind of homage to. And they have done that before, where they have tried to emulate more on some of the vintage type of jerseys. Overall, I'm with you that nothing beats the classic. Nothing beats the original, the longer sleeves. Was it the white pants with the darker purple and the purple face masks? I mean, that's a hard one to beat. So, I mean, I agree with the classics. I also really, really like the white ones for the road white jerseys, where it's all white, but you really see kind of that yellow, well, gold. You see the gold pop and the purple pop. So I like those. Cause and effect, which players you think are on the bubble going into Friday night's game? Yeah, I wonder about how much is decided. It's probably like 98% decided. And I don't know how many guys could make a difference. Remember the time we saw T.Y. McGill get 3 sacks and then they cut him? And it was like, and then he showed up in the Super Bowl with the 49ers. It was weird. But, someone like Zamiah Vaughn, like there's some guys that you would wonder about if they play. If they play, then they're on the bubble. Like if we see Isaiah Loudermilk, then we'll know, like maybe he's getting evaluated. And Elijah Williams might be a bubble guy. I've had him on the 53, but it's always possible that they're still trying to decide whether he's somebody that they want to see more or that they could get through to the practice squad. I think he's just been really good, but they might feel like they need a veteran at defensive tackle. There's not that many other guys. The outside linebackers will be worth watching if Tyler Batty's out there. Bo Richter, I think, is on the team for special teams purposes. Cameron Stewart, could he like totally shock us? Probably not by making the team, but he's somebody to watch. So I think there are guys and things to watch. Maybe I'll put together a list for tomorrow along with the vibe check. But I also don't know how many players I can really think. Oh, punters? Could this be the final? I mean, if they have them both punting, then it's still a punting competition. That's very real. If they're both punting and holding, this could be the last opportunity for them. If you guys have other players, I don't know, like Henry Bird making a last impression or Joe Huber on the interior offensive line, but I think most of this is set. So BM says Vikings 5 over the Packers and Bears. I might faint. Yeah, I know, but I just feel like in terms of offseason wise, the Vikings have had a better one than those teams. Just overall, now that we get the entire view, don't forget that the Chicago Bears lost their superstar center, Drew Dahlman, who they paid a ton of money for, just big star player. And he ends up, deciding to retire, and they go out and get Garrett Bradbury, who we know has his strengths and weaknesses. I don't think that he is as bad as some people make him out to seem. And there is ESPN kind of revamped some of their stuff, which I like that the effort is there, but never knew exactly how to work with some of their pass rush or pass blocking win rate stuff. But Bradbury last year was in the top 10, like just cracked the top 10. So I think he's gotten better as he's gone along in his career, but I still don't think he's Drew Dahlman, who was one of the best in the NFL. And then now they're going to potentially trade Gervin Dexter, and they haven't added to their D-line. There's a good case there that they weren't even really that great last year, considering they didn't have a great point differential. It was very much like Vikings 2022-ish. And then the Packers, they have a really good quarterback, and that's always going to get you in the mix with Jordan Love. That defense, though, is very, very suspect. Where is the defender outside of Micah Parsons who scares you at all on the Green Bay Packers? Oh, maybe this is the year that Lucas Van Ness takes another step. Like I think last year they missed their shot with Micah Parsons, and they're going to need to build, and they're going to need to hit on some drafts. And without 2 first-round draft picks that they traded for Parsons, I think it was 2 first-round picks, then that's going to be harder too. But the receivers, like the inconsistent health for Jaden Reed and for Christian Watson, Matthew Golden, I think has a chance to take another step. Tucker Kraft, I think is great. Their offensive line, though, their commitment to the run game when they can't run that well. I'm just not sold that these teams have had better off seasons than the Minnesota Vikings, who have had a lot of things click in. Cause and effect after Friday, we'll finally be able to put to bed the Harry coming back news. No, probably not. I mean, until there's any sort of answer, then it will linger into the season if they have an injury or something, and he could decide after camp that it's the time to come back, I suppose. Or we could hear from him. I've always left all options open because I don't think that Harrison Smith tells people what's going on. But, I think he'll maybe at some point give some indication if he is deciding to retire and really call it a day, because I'm sure the Vikings would want to do something for him. But I mean, I don't really know. He's not the type that wants to throw a party for himself. They would have to have him kicking and screaming a little bit for that. But if he is coming back and wants to try to play the entire season, then yeah, sure, that would have to happen pretty soon. But I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if he just sort of stays ready and decides based on how things go. Because if you're Harrison, maybe you think, well, I could play 8 games if we're in the playoff race and I'm needed, or I could just play none. Norris Force, the Lions ain't better than us. Yeah, I mean, so here's the thing about, like, it's not just are you better, but also we have to consider other factors as well. Number one, they have the most consistently excellent quarterback. That there is nobody over the last 5 years or 4 years who has been more consistent with operating a top 5 offense than Jared Goff. I don't believe that there's any other quarterback who's had a top 5 offense every single year over the last 4 years other than Jared Goff. So when you start from that position, they have probably the number 1 running back in the league. They have an elite wide receiver. Their number 2 wide receiver had 1,000 yards. Their tight end is a Pro Bowler. Like, their offensive line is suspect, but their offensive coordinator is new and I think improved from what they had last year. They have Aiden Hutchinson, one of the best pass rushers in the league. They still have some defensive talent on the front line there. So, and they just have a very easy schedule as we look at it right now. They play the last place schedule. I think it's going to help them. And in a division where you're talking about maybe the difference between 12 and 11, I'm giving them the slight edge there. But I mean, 1 doesn't mean I'll be right. But 2, it's not just like how strong is their roster from start to finish. A power ranking to me is also trying to project who's going to have the most wins by those teams. And we have to include the most blue chip talent and the easiest schedule. Jason also saying Detroit is too high. John says the first time in a long time, I have absolutely no idea what the Vikings will do. I wouldn't be surprised with 6 wins, wouldn't be surprised by 11. I would be surprised by 6. 6 would have to mean Kyler Murray gets hurt. I'm having trouble now seeing any world where it's a disaster as long as Kyler is healthy. He's just too good for it to be atrocious, I think. And with this defense, with this supporting cast, with his talent, after seeing it for all of training camp, like I've narrowed it a little bit if he's healthy. But if he's not, then of course, as you know, like anything is on the table. The Lions defense sucks, Norse Forest says. I mean, it's still got talent. And last year they were doing well into the middle of the season before they had some injuries, which I know, like you have to bake into that. And like where they're at with Brian Branch has been injured. Kirby Joseph has been injured. Some serious injuries for guys like that. I mean, that's a factor. They also get Elaine McNeil back, who's one of the best in the league at defensive tackle. And they also have one of the best edge rushers in the entire NFL. Like they shouldn't be that bad. Joker, if you can't wait for football, watch Kyler 2025 against the 49ers and try not to throw your TV into a lake. The Cardinals should be relegated. The Seahawks and Titans games were also rage-inducing. The Titans loss was one of the strangest and most bizarre things I've ever seen in a game, like where they fumble in the end zone, I think. The Seahawks game was a tough watch, but the San Francisco game for the Cardinals was abominable. Like, not from Kyler, but Kyler plays really well in that game. And Marvin Harrison Jr., I think all he has to do is catch a wide open pass. And I mean wide open pitch and catch, and just hits him right in the hands. So yeah. But I would say this: if you are excited about where it's going with Kyler Murray and some of the reports from camp and everything else, then 2024 versus the Rams is the game for you. That is the game for you. If you watch that one, you're going to be convinced that something has happened here. Norse Forest, Detroit still hasn't found a center, and Jason says they have no secondary. And I think both of those criticisms are reasonable, but I also think that we have to push some other things with the sliders, pretty far up. That they have one of the best running backs in the entire NFL. They could control the game that way. That even when things have gone wrong for Goff, yes, under pressure he struggles, but they still had a top 5 offense last year, even with all these things going wrong. So I'm giving them a lot of credit. Vikings Wild Wolves says Goff leads the league in passing yards since he came into the league. Not surprised by that statistic. Probably just most underappreciated player in the NFL for a long time. But was traded for Matthew Stafford. Stafford wins a Super Bowl. I get it. But when you've got Goff, you've got a baseline of success. And when you have things go your way schedule-wise, like they're going to play the NFC South too. They're going to play the Jets. They're going to play the Dolphins. Only they also get to play, the Titans and the Cardinals? What are the odds that those teams are even competitive? So I think that is a difference versus the Vikings having to play a team like San Francisco, a much, much harder opponent than the Arizona Cardinals. Those are the small differences that would make it. And look where I had them in the power rankings right next to each other, 4 and 5. It's not like I put Detroit 3 and the Vikings 12th or something. John, think Charles Demings is my new favorite Viking. Great sound bites and might be able to back it up. He's been able to back it up a lot in training camp, and he's still out there, mixing and matching with first and second team. I think that there's belief there from them. Will we see him play right away? I don't think so. I think it's going to be James Pierre. But in terms of longer term, if there's an injury, he's next man up for sure if there's an injury. And you never know if that's going to be the case with someone who's drafted in the 5th round. So been very impressive. BM in a 32-man melee of head coaches, Dan Campbell would be the last man standing, bloody and bruised, but brimming with joy. I didn't know we were bringing poetry to the live stream here tonight, but Mike Vrabel might have a good chance, but you're probably right. Like Dan Campbell is the most aggressive. That's funny, Norse Forest. How can you put Green Bay ahead of Arizona? BM putting Green Bay last pretty much guarantees they'll win the Super Bowl. Thank you. Look, I don't know what to do with them because I do think that Jordan Love is very good. And I do think that they have a very good tight end who's coming back from an injury, but he can really play. And if their run game is working, it could be good with Jacobs. He actually graded well by PFF last year, even though the numbers weren't maybe as good, because he is a good player. Their receivers, when they're all healthy and all on point, can create big plays down the field. There's no doubt about that. I just wonder if every game that they're going to play in a shootout, and I don't know if they're built for that. You saw that when they had to play Chicago last year. Like, are they really built to win shootouts? They seem to be built to win a certain type of game. What did Jordan Love average for yards per game last year? Like 215? I mean, they just don't lean into that style of play, and I don't know if they can win those games. And look, I still think they're good, like an 8-win team, and they're better than a lot of the other teams in the NFC. I had them better than Tampa Bay, and Tampa Bay's winning their division. But I'm just having a lot of trouble buying into their defense. BM, who among us doesn't stop by a rant? Okay, yeah. Yeah, San Francisco. San Francisco. I know. I mean, look, no one's had a worse offseason, right, than San Francisco. Ricky Pearsall. I mean, I joke about the power station, but then their owner gets arrested. I mean, this is just crazy. So many things. Their coach gets in a car accident. It's just crazy. Cowboys 15th and the Packers 16th is the right answer. I know people cannot stand the Cowboys. I do think that the Cowboys are going to be a good team. Where I think it's a little bit slightly logical fallacy would be that their offense last year will just translate and be the same. That's the one where I'm a little bit like, were they putting up big stats because their defense was so horrible? That's the question I have about the Cowboys. Was their offense really the best offense in the entire league? Or was the stats pumped up a little bit by the fact that they were just always playing in shootouts and having to throw every single play? BM, yeah. If McCarthy hadn't missed that one practice last year, he would have been MVP. Yeah, that thing came up over and over again. And I think in the long run, we've seen that those issues would not have been resolved by one more practice. Mike, don't really count Scene's injury because he was a bust that couldn't process NFL speed by the time he was injured. Has there ever been a first-round safety buried year one that was good? Probably not, because safety is the quickest. From the study that was done by PFF years ago, and maybe it's changed a little, but Timo Risky, who is one of the best analytics people out there, did a study on how fast each position translates. And I'll tell you, defensive tackle is not the fastest. So that's one to keep an eye on for Banks. Like, this is not that uncommon for what's happening with Banks, but with safety, it is uncommon. Usually you draft a guy to start. If you're drafting him in the first, second, or even third round, he's probably going to start, especially if it's first. He should. It's the quickest transition position. We've seen lots of guys come into that spot, whether it was Sendejo or Anthony Harris or, Theo Jackson or Cam Bynum, like lots of players who were not highly touted who came in and played right away or within a couple of years and played well. Like Sendejo had been in the league a little bit, and so had Harris, but those guys had very little experience and played well. So yes, I mean, I agree that it was not going well for Lewis Cine before that, but could he have become at least, something on this team as opposed to a guy that just didn't work out at all? I don't know. Like, you always leave the door open for that injury could have. And I think that injuries have a mental impact on players, on some players, that is a really heavy weight to carry. I've always wondered that about McCarthy. Like, everyone would love to say that, yeah, I'm fine after that injury. But, like, are you? Or did that have an impact? Like, anybody who's been in a car accident before, you know this, right? Like, I got rear-ended one time, and for the next, 6 months, every time somebody pulled up behind me, it was like a little flinch there. And like, that can happen when you're an NFL player and you have an injury. Like, that's real. Like, the traumatic stress thing can happen. So I always leave the door open for that when guys have injuries early on. I think it's the hardest thing is to come into the NFL and then get hurt quickly. Do want to remind you guys again about our wonderful sponsor and the FanDuel question of the day. The FanDuel question of the day was, the Vikings are 6.5-point underdogs against the Broncos. Oh no! On FanDuel. And I want to know if there's anything left that you want to know from the final preseason game, or if you're just watching it for the vibes and to see people run around in purple uniforms. Okay. And I want to tell you about, Brooklyn betting. that they've been such a great sponsor here, and my Aurora Lux mattress has been a total life changer for me. And, the biggest thing is about, buying a mattress. I've bought them cheap before, not really much of an investment, and unsurprisingly, they just don't last. So with Brooklyn Bedding, they're built here in the USA. The mattresses are cost effective, but what you're getting is something built for the long term, for durability. You can have it for a long time, not something that's built to just break down in a year and you throw it on the side of the road or something. Like, this is something that you want to keep for a long time. And the minute that we switched over to the new mattress, my back felt a lot better. And, when I'm dealing with these issues, it's been pretty tough at times, but at least, when I get into bed and go to sleep and have the energy to cover this here football team. So it's great. The experience was awesome. They offer mattresses for every sleep type, hard to find sizes, and you got that 120 night comfort trial. If you're not comfortable, you can always swap it or return it for another mattress hassle-free, but I'm not going to have to do that here. So brooklynbedding.com, promo code is purple to get 30% off site-wide. That is brooklynbedding.com, and the promo code is purple anywhere on that website at brooklynbedding.com. Get 30% off. It's a lot. So we're worth at least going over there and typing in that promo code. So, all right, back to the chat. Let's see. That's crazy, Vikings Wild Wolves, that you actually looked up what happened after Tom Brady had his first child. But you're probably right that that's not the greatest excuse in the world. Lots of guys have things happen in their family lives. It's part of being a pro. Mr. Mayor, way behind, but gotta say the uniform and the mannequin has a Davis Mills neck. Okay, I didn't look at that. Let's go back and look at it. It has a Davis Mills neck. Let me see. Let's put, I think you're right. Yeah, I think you're right. It does have kind of a long neck. It doesn't look that much like Justin Jefferson's arms would be a lot longer than this mannequin. His arms are very, very long and his hands are absolutely huge. Although I didn't touch them or measure them, but, I think when you look at it though, the tint of gold with this purple, with the number style, looks pretty snazzy. Do people still say snazzy is a good question. Norris forces McCarthy splitting second team reps with Wentz because of injury or performance. Don't know for sure. We'll hear from O'Connell tomorrow, but I would guess based on the way he was kind of dropping back, it didn't look like he was at 100% today in practice. Didn't look like he was too injured to practice, but I also wondered if Wentz was taking second team reps because the second team's going to start the third preseason game. With Wentz, that could be a possibility because he hasn't really practiced with some of these second team players that maybe they're going to have him play and keep JJ McCarthy on the bench because of his injury or just because they didn't want to play him in the third preseason game. We'll find out maybe, or maybe O'Connell will keep it enshrouded in mystery of whether they're going to start Wentz or Brosmer. I think if you're Wentz, you probably want to get out there and play because he has not had that many reps during preseason. So that went through my mind as well. It's like maybe he's out there because of that, or maybe they just wanted to have JJ McCarthy only do 7-on-7 so no one could kind of fall on him or step on him or anything like that when he's already dealing with an injury. John says the gift Murray may give the Vikings is forcing KOC to actually bend. His lack of pliability has hampered him in his growth as a coach. So I look at it a little bit differently. Like, pliability is a great word, John. Well done. I look at it a little bit as there's been an element of stubbornness at times and maybe like a horse blinderdedness. So instead of like he can't adjust or change his offense, I think he changes his offense every single week. When they're game planning, I think he adjusted it for Sam Darnold from Kirk Cousins. I think he's doing it again. I think he adjusted it for JJ McCarthy. Once he realized that JJ McCarthy couldn't run the entire thing, then it was adapted. They gave him a chance. They got back to 500. He played better down the stretch. Like, those things really happened with O'Connell making the adjustments for JJ McCarthy. And how could you know until he actually plays what you have to do? He's never played before. He had a pretty good training camp, so they were able to adapt on the fly. They were able to run the ball fairly successfully last year. If you look at the EPA and the run success last year, So, I think that he can adjust an offense. Like I mentioned before, I mean, this is somebody who has played with Tom Brady, was a coach for a lot of was practice squad with some teams, was a coach for a lot of teams. Like, he's been around the NFL a lot. It's not like he doesn't know what to do or is sitting there saying, no, we run my system and only my system. That kind of sounds a little more Childress-like. I think there's been a little stubbornness in terms of the way he wanted to win. And what we heard from him, and I am believing it based on what I've seen so far, but we're going to have to carry it into the games, is that he realized, yes, you can win in a grind fest. And sometimes you're going to have to. Sometimes you're going to have to rely on Flores' defense. Sometimes you're going to have to rely on running clock in the run game. Sometimes you get to 2nd and 1 at the goal line and just run the freaking ball 3 times and take a field goal if you have to, because why are you having Carson Wentz throw the ball? Like, right on 2nd and 1. Or why are you having JJ, who's having his worst night, try to throw the ball at the goal line? Like, just hand it to Jordan Mason. Let him do what he's supposed to do there. There's been a little bit of that. Like, I want to win a certain way. I want to put up certain numbers. I want to have Justin Jefferson catch a certain amount of footballs, where I think that we've heard from him that is an adjustment he wants to make, is win that game that day or whatever it takes. That's and finally really maybe recognizing you might have to change an offensive line coach and make some people upset. A really good person, Chris Cooper, who I think is good at his job, but I don't know that he was good with the run game. Like, I think he was good at his job. Like in terms of coaching actual offensive linemen, but he was a former offensive lineman, not a run game guy. Whereas Keith Carter has been more of a run game guy throughout his career. And then bringing in Frank Smith, like, that's shown some self-awareness there, as opposed to like, well, we'll just kind of like, make a change at running back and see if that works. And it did to some extent, but it did not like get them to the place that they wanted to be. And they didn't commit enough to it at certain times in games. But I do think that O'Connell knows these things. And he has said as much in these interviews. And he even said as much when he went on with Eric Kendricks and Anthony Barr. Like, I needed to do more with this run game. And he's realized that. Will it show up? That's going to be the question for sure. Son of Beavers. I don't think Isaiah Loudermilk makes the team. Zamiah Vaughn would be better for depth. I like Vaughn as a depth player. I think he has special teams potential, and I like just more defensive backs. He also might be a guy who could get to the practice squad. I've thought that Loudermilk is a guy who could get to the practice squad. The only thing I could think of is just a veteran presence there, someone who's been in games. They just have none of that on this defensive line. Not like a guy who's played a lot or for winning teams and, things like that, as Loudermilk has. And he hasn't been like in terms of huge snap count, but he's been, on those teams and he's been in games. That might be a factor. He also can kind of emulate the size of Caleb Banks, and there are very few people who can. So if you have certain things designed to play off of the size of somebody, maybe you want to keep that guy as a backup. Like, there's a lot of factors that we don't always put into it. Norris Force, Dawkins will be a great end, has the size, strength, and good feet. I've been very impressed with his athleticism, his strength for sure. His size is significant, but also his attitude. I mean, every time I've talked to him, you come away impressed with his attitude. And I know that's what Brian Flores talked about as well. They identified at Georgia when he was coming out, because we talked to people after the draft. They'll give us, sometimes different people, whether it's like director of college scouting or somebody who scouted the player or whatever it is, to talk about those guys. And they really put an emphasis on his personality, that they felt like he would be a guy who could learn quickly. And we have seen that from Ty Ingram Dawkins for sure. BM, KOC adapted last year, committed to the run more, still not enough, and dumbed down the playbook enough for JJ to not be an unmitigated disaster in the final few games. Yeah, I agree with that. John, curious how much of the fandom thinks Flores is a bigger reason the Vikings have won during his tenure. Not sure that KOC would have most of these wins without him. Well, I mean, I think that Flores has been a big part of it. And when you have, games like last year, where would they have been last year? So there's several different conversations here. Where would they have been last year without Brian Flores? In Screwed Town is where they would have been. Population KOC, or drafting higher, and maybe that would have been better for them. They would not have had many wins if not for Brian Flores. At the end of the year, the performance against Dallas, their offense was pretty good that night, but the defense was great on every single third down against that offense. For sure, the Christmas game, no chance they win that football game if Flores isn't there. So, yeah, they're probably like a 6 or 5 win team without Flores' defense last year being as good as it was. But if we go through 2024, 2023, 2022, I mean, how many games did they win because of late game play calling from Kevin O'Connell having to make up for the fact that Ed Donatel was lost out there? So they won a lot of games that year based on the offense's clutch performance and based on Justin Jefferson winning Offensive Player of the Year. I don't think you can give the defense credit for almost any of those 13 wins. Is it any? Like, is there a single win? Okay, maybe Washington. They played pretty bad on offense against Washington in 2022, and they got a late interception where Taylor Heineke airmailed somebody. Not many wins there. 2023, if we only look at as half a season and then with the rest of it, but like, because it was just backup quarterbacks and madness with Josh Dobbs and Nick Mullins and everything. But the defense wasn't that great in 23 as they were revamping. The first part of the season, though, they win the game against Green Bay. That's offense. They win the game against San Francisco. They played well on defense, but Kirk was great that night. I mean, like there's 2024, a lot of the success is the quarterback performance from Sam Darnold. And I think they finished 9th in scoring that year, and they were really good defense, but also, I mean, the offense put up a requisite amount of points to say that they drove a lot of wins. Like they were way ahead against the Green Bay Packers based on their offense in that game, way ahead on San Francisco. Like it's been, a joint effort between the two. I think it's a really good coaching combination, but I'm not sure that narrative's actually correct outside of last year. I think that they've had, in the years where they've been good, they've had really good offenses. Have they been great offenses? No, but they've been in the range of top 10 EPA passing offenses, and the run game is what's kind of kept them behind. Son of Beavers, well, you're going way deep into the depth there if you're saying you want the Vikings to get Taj Washington, who was cut from the Dolphins, a 7th round draft pick. That you're doing too many draft sims if you know who that is. So yeah. But yeah, I mean, look, I think that there's some people out there that are going to need to see Kevin O'Connell get into the playoffs and win, or will continue to say the same things. And I'm not saying that those narratives are completely wrong. Like there's truth to all rumors. There's truth to all of these kind of, thoughts about Kevin O'Connell. I just think that some of them are overstated. And when we go back to that win-loss record with either Kirk Cousins or Sam Darnold, it's a pretty big sample size and it's pretty impressive. And can you do that again with Kyler Murray? He's got to prove it like everyone else. Like I don't take away from the pressure on O'Connell to win or to get the most out of Kyler Murray or to call the game the right way and, everything, right? But I think if you're saying the only reason they've ever won games is Flores, that's just not true. I think we know that. Gatino's Christmas channel, Niners have Stribling, and he looked great in the preseason for them, then got dinged up. Of course he did. I didn't know that he got banged up. He was looking pretty good from the highlights that I saw of Stribling, but it's also preseason. They know what they're doing on offense. It's just, is George Kittle really going to be back to 100% after an Achilles tear? They have to go to Australia to start their season. Yeah, I don't know about that. I just don't know. If they're going to be that good this year. I think it's a pretty tough road for the 49ers. Bigger bag fumble, Tony Romo or Brandon Ayuk. That's a pretty tough one for Tony Romo because you're talking about many, many millions of dollars. But I also think that the bag fumble for Tony Romo is also his performance. And I don't pay a ton of attention to a lot of games because usually on Sunday, if they're happening and I'm in front of a TV, it's usually in the press box and it's on mute and I'm working on an article or running the podcast or whatever else or recording the podcast. So I usually only hear the national broadcasts on like Monday night and Sunday night football if I'm covering a noon Minnesota Vikings game. But then we get to the playoffs and there's been a couple of years where the Vikings haven't been in it. And I hear Tony Romo and I just think this guy just doesn't sound very prepared. And I wonder if he took the job for granted a little bit of like, oh, everyone just loves my personality. So I'm just going to be this big old voice and yeah, Jim, I'm excited. But that only takes you so far. I mean, people want entertainment and excitement, but they also want some insight in what's going on out there. And I think that really faded in recent years. And Brandon Ayuk, I just hope the guy's okay. I just hope that like he's all right emotionally, because it doesn't seem that like he is, and mentally. Yeah. I mean, Ayuk, of course, it's sad, like what happened with his injury and stuff. And that's why I was talking about how like sometimes these injuries have a real mental toll on people, and we do not give enough credit to that. Jim want to see McCarthy play all game this week. That might be his last chance to see him in live action without any penalty. And you mean a regular season loss? I had it in my head as well, Jim, that why not just play him every single snap of the preseason? Why not just get him as much action as possible? But there are a few things where it's like, well, then you have to play the second team the entire time. He hasn't practiced with any of those other guys. Which maybe you say, who cares? Like, just go throw the football. But usually, like, practicing with people before you play football is kind of important. And then gets banged up. And after that, I'm like, I don't know, man. I just don't know. Can you trust him to even put him out there in the third preseason game and not get hurt again? Not, somebody's trying to, KOC's brought this up. Somebody's out there trying to desperately make a team, and they want to lay the wood on a quarterback. Even if it's a late hit, you're putting your guy potentially in a little bit of trouble for someone that you may need in the season. Herm Williams, Elijah Williams, I assume you mean, is Mr. Mankato. So the way I've always thought of it, Mr. Williams, is for someone like Elijah Williams last year making the team and playing games. He was Mr. Mankato. He's the best story by far in training camp. Miles Price was close, but Elijah Williams coming from HBCU, not a guy that they even signed right away, had to come to the rookie tryout, makes the team. That was an incredible story. He should be considered Mr. Mankato for 2025. Now he's just a member of the team, and he's had a really great camp. He's been outstanding in these preseason games. I think both games have been graded over 80 by PFF. Every game he's had in the preseason that he's ever played has graded well by PFF. And then, we watch the tape back and so forth and see the penetration he gets, the strength he has, the tackling ability. I got Elijah Williams on the team. So I think he's had an excellent training camp and somebody to continue to build on and go forward, just the way they have with Ty Ingram Dawkins and with Levi Drake Rodriguez, kind of either late draft picks or UDFA in this case, and somebody who's made a real impression. So yeah, but Mr. Mankato for me is probably going to be Jacob Roberts, just because of kind of how the made up rules work of he's the UDFA from this year that has emerged and taken on that spot. So, but it's been an impressive journey from, for Elijah Williams, for sure. Yes, I do, Mike, remember the interception that Nick Mullins threw against the Cincinnati Bengals. One of the weirdest ones I've ever seen. Sometimes it is so hard out there. Sometimes these things happen and somebody kind of freaks out a little bit and they don't even understand what happened. Like, all you had to do is take a sack, you get a field goal, you win that game, and maybe you make the playoffs. And instead, that happened. The tush push incident happened. What a weird year 2023 was. What a really, really weird year. Kay says quarterback's better than Brosmer, JJ Strand, Fagnano, King. Oh, Hayden King. Yeah. I don't know who, Atmeyer is. Aller, Howard, and Beck. You're talking about like these other young quarterbacks around the league who have looked a lot better in preseason. And I agree. And this is the trouble with what JJ McCarthy has done in these preseason games is it's pretty hard to justify. It really is, because when you're talking about these other quarterbacks, we look at the completion percentage from even someone like Nick Mullins or these other guys who are second and third stringers around the league, and they're completing 75% of their passes. It should look that way. Ty Simpson comes in and does a bunch of rollouts and completes like 22 of 26 or something. It shouldn't look like this. It shouldn't look like throwing the ball 5 yards over his wide receivers who are wide open in the end zone. Shouldn't look that way. Purple Tears, does anyone know how nicked up JJ is? It can't be that bad since he was practicing today and doing 7-on-7s. Did look like he was a little bit on the stiff side. Jack Strand is somebody that kind of I had heard about a little bit because he is from here, that there was some intrigue in the NFL, and I actually thought he might get drafted, and he's gone to Atlanta and played really well. That would be some kind of story. If Jack Strand could make their team and potentially be a quarterback for them long-term, but he looked pretty good. But when you have undrafted free agent guys coming from, is that a D2 school, FCS or D2 schools who are looking fine in preseason, you go, there's really no excuse for McCarthy to not complete some of the passes he did. Mike says, not buying Turner until I see him stop getting eaten up by tackles and develop more pass rush moves. The only rep I saw from Ravens practice was speed to power. So here's the thing about a bag of pass rush moves is it's one of the most overrated things, I think, in the sport is talking about having a deep bag of moves, because most guys win on their, so Grenard was really good at this. He had a lot of different type of moves. Most guys win on one or two moves. I mean, this is not like a situation where I mean, it's kind of like it's basketball. Where what does Allen Iverson win with? It's crossover. Allen Iverson's winning with the crossover. It's so good you can't stop it. I mean, if you're talking about Dallas Turner, it's his burst. It's his get off. It's you're going to shoot around the edge on that guy, or you're going to convert the speed to power and drive into the offensive tackle. Now, when you talk about like getting eaten up by tackles, any smaller guy, it's going to happen unless you're Von Miller in your prime. So it will happen where you get taken out on some rushes and you don't get that push back that somebody who's 260 or 270 pounds would get. That's the outside linebacker position also lends itself to that because you're not lined up directly over the guy. So you're trying to put on your move. And if it gets snuffed out, it gets snuffed out. That's going to happen. For me, it's about setting edges, which I think he's been a lot better at. That will make a big difference. Can they? Because if you're a team going against the Vikings, you're going to think, we're going to run at Dallas Turner and sort of make him prove to us that he could set that edge and stop us. That's what he's going to have to prove. But, I mean, of course, for anybody, it's like, well, they've got to prove they're great until they're great. But we can only really know right now what we've seen in camp. And it's been the best case scenario for Dallas Turner. That's what we can know right now. Mike says, I expect Turner to be slightly above average, but nothing special given the trajectory of players who perform like him in years 1 or 2. I don't know about that. There are guys who have not put up huge sack numbers. I had a whole list of them last year in their first, well, last year he had 8 sacks, so that's a pretty good jump. But somebody like Odafe Owe, an undersized speed rusher who turned into, a very expensive player for the Washington Commanders, he comes to mind. Will McDonald from the Jets comes to mind. Just right off the kind of top of my head, who was the guy from the Chargers? Ingram. What was his first name? Mark? It was Mark, right? Mark Ingram? Someone Ingram. Why am I blanking on this? Now I got to look this up. Pass rusher Ingram. It was, Melvin Ingram. Sorry about that. Usually I've got all those names right in the front of my brain. Melvin Ingram is a good example of a guy who was undersized, came into the league, didn't get a ton of sacks in the first year, and then took off from there. So I think this is actually a common type of trajectory for guys his age. I think that, for some people, maybe this is how you look at it. Until somebody actually does something, it's like, don't talk to me. And I'm not always that way. I'm looking at the arrow. That's how I do it. Because otherwise I feel like I would just spend a lot of time being like, he's done nothing. Let's talk about Charles Deming's done nothing. Let's talk about, Levi Drake Rodriguez. Levi done nothing Rodriguez. I mean, right? So all I can tell you is that what I've seen from Dallas Turner, who is 23, by the way, that his performance in camp, his body, it matches up with what you would expect from a guy who was drafted with some development needed in the middle of the first round, but is also a first round talent who was a very, very good player at Alabama. I don't know where the ceiling ends up lying. I know where I think the bar is set, which is, can you get to double digit sacks? Can you get to 50 to 60 pressures? Can you be a guy who plays 750 to 1,000 snaps, somewhere in that range? Can you be that guy? But I don't know where he's going to land on that spectrum. I can only say as of right now that everything has come together for him to look like he's ready to take the next step. It's no guarantees. The Purple Insider show does not offer guarantees that things will happen good for your football team. That is a PSA that I might have to read every show. The Purple Insider show tries to figure out what's going to happen, but is not quite sure. Here are my power rankings. I don't know if a power station matters to the 49ers or not. John says, what in Vikings history is all white? Nothing, but it was an amazing uniform. Yeah, true. And I think you're talking about like when I said like there's nothing with the black, maybe they could create a black uniform to be a little bit different, but they do have a uniform in their past that was white and white. It just had a little more color on it. So it still looked like with the purple outlines on that white uniform, what they used to have when they were on the road. So, that would be similar to what we saw in the past. The Bronze Soul says, was Dante the last rookie quarterback that made it to his second contract? The Vikings have no patience. Well, JJ McCarthy, I don't think is a patient situation. Still on the team, but what were they supposed to do with patience? What were they supposed to do with Christian Ponder? What were they supposed to do with Teddy Bridgewater? Like, what, he got injured in such a severe way that they couldn't bring him back and assume he was going to be the franchise quarterback. With which quarterback were they supposed to be more patient, would be my question. And if this is like saying they should have been more patient with JJ, how could you? How could you? How could you watch the way he played in preseason games and what we've seen in training camp and say, oh yeah, put that quarterback in and just let him go with all these good defenders and this great defensive coordinator and these great receivers and this offensive line with 2 superstar tackles and this veteran running back room, and just like, yeah, dude, we're going to put our fate in you because we need to be patient because people on the internet said we weren't patient enough. I mean, that's not how it works. They're a good enough team to win 11 games, potentially, if things go right for them. And you're supposed to just play the younger guy just to play the younger guy. I think you do that when you're the Dolphins. I don't think you do that when you're the Minnesota Vikings right now. That's like, I mean, were they supposed to, John mentions Christian Ponder. Were they supposed to be more patient with Christian Ponder? It was terrible. Were they supposed to be, quarterbacks who play like this, you don't get patience when you perform among the worst quarterbacks in the NFL. You just don't get patience. And it's a tough league, but a lot of young quarterbacks have come in and have done well in the NFL. And so you can't just sit there and go, well, we just got to keep playing them and we'll just waste all these players' talents and all these coaches' time and everything else so we could just say that we for sure were patient enough with a young quarterback. Not when you have another guy who's good, who's done a lot more in his career and is clearly more talented at this moment. So, yeah. Why don't they just stick with developing someone they have tried to develop him this offseason, and they will develop him behind the scenes in the same way that the Packers developed Malik Willis behind the scenes. But I mean, I cannot fathom a situation where you would have said that it would have been a good idea this year to just bring back all these guys. Now, look, if they had torn the roster limb for limb and they had just said, Hawkins is gone, Jones is gone, trade this guy, get rid of that guy, then okay, sure. Yeah, then just play JJ and whatever happens, happens. And maybe you draft Arch Manning if it goes bad. But not when you have this much talent. Not when you just paid $6 million to bring back Brian Flores to coach the hell out of this defense. Absolutely not. You're trying to win. And it's, unfortunate for JJ McCarthy because if he is on a horrible team, then sure, yeah, he'd be getting to play more. But I also think development doesn't have to happen in games, as we've seen from a lot of quarterbacks through the years. Thank you, Chris, for the super chat. What are your thoughts on the rivalry uniforms? Look a lot like the Ravens. So my personal opinion on the rivalry uniforms is that it is a very difficult situation for those designing them to try to grab some interesting elements, bring in something a little fresh, while also still saying kind of classic, while not going too far away from what your traditional uniforms are, but also not just creating a same version of your uniform. And I think that they hit the middle of all that. And they found a color, which I understand the Ravens use, but also the Minnesota Vikings are purple as well. They're not even in the same conference. Like, I get that, but this is a purple that they've had in their past. So bringing that into it, the darker gold is kind of interesting. It's a new, fresh kind of look at it. So I think they did a pretty good job. Overall, I think they did a pretty good job. Vikings Wild Wolf says, I agree with developing JJ McCarthy if he showed that he can read the field and throw the ball, but he hasn't. And that's the hard part. And that's where I stand as well. If there was last year a lot of signs of, hey, this could be pretty good, but it just needs more work, then maybe you handle things differently. And maybe if he could be healthy, which Dan says, I wonder if the Vikings turf is contributing to his injuries. Didn't he get hurt in Green Bay last year? So I'm going to go with no. And I also think someone tackling him out of bounds, probably not either. I don't think the first one either. That was a little bit of hard to figure out, but I think he may have already had an injury and then it aggravated it, but I'm not sure. Maybe the first one. I don't know. Maybe the turf monster got him there, but there was injuries on every type of surface. Anyway, if there had been signs, then you probably handle things differently in the offseason and you try to split the difference between developing him and keeping your team together. There just weren't enough. There just weren't enough signs. And he got a lot of opportunity to show that there were this offseason and just didn't. Philosopher, could Max Bredesen play the role of pass-catching threat out of the backfield if Aaron Jones was hurt? Not super familiar with X's and O's, but he did catch a pass in the preseason. He did, and he technically was a tight end for Michigan. I think he's got good enough hands. I think that what his role will probably be is a check down, a swing pass now and then when he's in there and they run play action game or something like that, could leak out. Might be a pass protector potentially, depending on how things go in the scenario, which means the possibility of leaking out into the flat or something like that. I don't think he's a threat. I think it's probably like catches 5 passes in a season, unless he plays a ton. But he can catch the ball. He's capable of it. He's just not going to be somebody who is, used a lot in the passing game. If Aaron Jones is out, it's going to be Xavier Scott would be the guy who can catch the ball. Probably the most. So once we've devolved into the arguing about JJ McCarthy versus Christian Ponder portion, it usually means it's like the wrap it up sign. So I'll get to a few more questions. And then normally, I think, if I'm not mistaken, normally this third practice is usually like a longer one. And I'm expecting, because last year, I remember McCarthy threw a ton of passes in the last practice that we were open to. And I think that might be the case tomorrow for Kyler Murray. So we'll see. And then we'll do the official, we'll do a breakdown. We'll do the official vibe check and so forth. But we'll just take a couple more questions here and get to the end of the night. But it's been a really fun show. Anytime we could power rank something and argue about it, I like that. Sean, you were asking about Caleb Tiernan for the tackle. Well, yeah, I wasn't sure if you meant offensive tackle, defensive tackle. Caleb Tiernan, yeah, to me, did look like he was in over his head in his first game. And I don't think that he's going to play against the Denver Broncos. I don't think that he's ready health-wise. I didn't see him. I didn't look today if he was out there or not, because it wasn't really a real practice. But we'll see tomorrow if he's out there. But I think that that's probably a situation where Tiernan will be the likely healthy scratch early in the season. Ryan Vandemark, who for my money has looked very good in this training camp. I think Vandemark can start for someone someday. Maybe after this year, he can go be a starter somewhere. I think he's maybe not a top half of the league starting tackle, but a starting caliber. He's absolutely huge, moves bodies, good in the run game. Like I think he is a solid fill-in for them. And Tiernan's going to have to develop behind the scenes for a year. And that was pretty clear in his first preseason game. But sorry for the confusion on that. Josh, is Harrison coming back? What's the verdict? Well, if I had to give a verdict, I would go with probably not. But, I mean, you just never know, man. This is the Minnesota Vikings. You never really know. McCarthy does have a lot of Will Levis in him. I agree with that. If we're talking about like similarities. BM holdout Banks all year except for against Chicago. That's funny. Against Garrett Bradbury. Thank you, RView Weathers. Appreciate the compliment there. Jake Golday is him, says that would be Jake Golday for DBOY. At least you're on brand with that. I've really liked what I saw from Jake Golday. I really did in this last preseason game. Aggressive, played fast, rushed the passer, drove the running back into the quarterback. I liked a lot. Like this draft class, there's questions at the very top of it with Caleb Banks, and there's going to be patience required there, and we're not going to know for a little while what they actually have. The rest of it, though, looks like contributors, depth players, potential for the future, kind of all over the field. Jonathan says, I would still like to see an autopsy article chronicling the McCarthy draft and how much they really tried to give up for May and how sold they were on JJ needing a quarterback other than Darnold. Yeah, I mean, the thing about an autopsy article, I mean, maybe someday, if they trade him, I'll do it. But I don't think there's anything you don't know, because we've really followed this day by day, every single step. And there seems to be times where people want this, well, there's actually this mysterious thing that has been going on. And I will admit that a little bit with Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah was like that, where you heard for a while, it was like, well, people are whispering and everything else and drafting, and is there, dissent between certain that sort of stuff. And then when all of us wrote those articles, there was some stuff that people were unaware of that were in those articles. I don't know that you're going to find that with JJ McCarthy. I don't feel like it's all that mysterious. They drafted a quarterback based on his tools, based on his character, based on the fact that he was a winner and the upside. They only had a choice between one other quarterback, and it was just Bo Nix. It was either draft the 24-year-old who was a finished product that they didn't think had the upside, or draft the kid that they thought that they could develop by sitting for a year. They had a good plan. That plan got derailed. When he came back, they made a massive miscalculation, and actually two of them, one of them letting go Sam Darnold, the other one not having the ability to sign Daniel Jones because he was going to go elsewhere. And they hugely miscalculated that, thinking that he was in their building and would want to be their backup quarterback. And then McCarthy turns out to have a pretty good training camp. Maybe there's some confidence there. The injuries keep setting him back to square one. And then there's too much pressure to win to just stay going down that road and hoping and dreaming. So they go out and get another quarterback. McCarthy doesn't show a ton of progress. And we are reaching the point where, yeah, there are a lot of QBs who were drafted in the middle of the first round that just didn't work out. And that's where we're at right now. And then there's also some QBs who have turned things around. And as far as how much they were trying to give up for Drake May, what I could say about that is the Giants did this offseason thing where they did a documentary behind the scenes and they said way too much in front of the cameras. But it was awesome, actually, to see how that really worked in the offseason. And there is a scene where they are drafting fourth and they try to trade from fourth to third to get Drake May, and New England says no. So you think the Vikings were getting from 11th to third? They knew who they were taking the entire time. They were not trading out of it. So I don't think they ever could have gotten Drake May, except if they had lost some games, then they would have. Casey isn't Brosmer taking majority of snaps against the Broncos, if not all of them. Yeah, I would expect that we're seeing a lot of Max Brosmer. Let the hate reign over you. Wow, that is quite an intense name for YouTube. Do you think that there's any chance Harrison comes back? It feels like the ship has sailed. Is there a chance? Yes. Do I think it's high? I don't. I think there is a chance that he decides to come back at some point, but I also think that with all these young safeties getting their chance and opportunity, that maybe he just wants to stay on the sideline. Eric, if you were the GM, what would you do with our cap space? I would carry it as much over as I possibly could. That's what I would do with it. Because luckily for, the Vikings and other teams with salary cap space, that is a rule that you can carry over cap space from year to year. And next year, if you need to use it for a quarterback, or if you need to use it for, hey, this roster suddenly looks young and good, but if they only had two more big free agents, they're in a spot right now where if they carry over $20 million, that would be really good for them. Would I use some of it on Hassan Reddick? Probably, if that was a situation that arose. But ideally, you would be able to just carry it over, and as opposed to trying to use that every last dollar. You'd say that the Vikings defense won the Bills game in 2022? Yeah, I mean, they did pick off Josh Allen and also gave up like 1,000,000 yards. I mean, they did come through clutch, but I mean, Justin Jefferson, Kirk Cousins, call it a split on that one, I guess at best. Call it a split. But I mean, they needed a huge offensive comeback, an 80-yard touchdown run or whatever it was, 70-yard touchdown run from Dalvin Cook. Call that one a shootout. But I don't think that they won a lot of games with the defense in 2022. Mike, the passing rank, EPA is what you're looking for with, well, I mean, because when we're talking about Kevin O'Connell and passing drives success more than anything, then if they've had 2 years of top 10 passing EPA passing games, and that's the thing that drives success the most, and they've had 1 year of top 15 running EPA, just maybe put them together. But I mean, the passing part is the hardest part of it, should be, as opposed to getting a halfway decent run game. But yeah, I mean, like when we look at where teams have ranked in EPA for running games, there is very little correlation to getting to the Super Bowl. But in passing games, there's a very strong correlation. That's why. I'm not saying you don't want to run the ball. You certainly do. The passing game is what's going to drive you, though, without question. So anyway, they should have been more patient with Brett Favre is funny. Dan says the Turner haters keep looking for excuses. Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be that. Yep. Which is why we should just always look at it for what it is. And what it is a guy who slowly developed, had a breakout in the second half of last year and is now in a position to really prove it and has done everything he possibly could to this point. We can't play the games right now, so I can only tell you to this point what has happened with Dallas Turner. But there seems to be some folks who, yes, have like really dug their heels in. Like, this guy sucks. They blew, the draft picks and everything else. And I mean, I'm not saying rooting against him, but like the do seem like very strongly convinced of that and can't prove them wrong until the games start. Jared says, Flores is the kind of coach I think people want to play hard for, straightforward, honest, keeps it realistic. He also is brilliant. Yeah, I think he coaches people hard and he's not for everybody, but the players who are really smart connect so well with him. And that's why someone like Ty Ingram Dawkins, I think, does really well in a scenario like this. Where is Arif? That is the strangest comment of the night. I don't know. In his house, I would assume. Joker, we need Vandermark for 6 offensive lineman plays. Yeah, I love 6 offensive linemen. I'm a big fan of that. I think they should use it. I think they should. First name, last name. I don't think the issue with KOC's adaptation is that his offense that's adjusted for his quarterback rather than building the offense around the quarterback and adjusting toward what he wants. I'm not sure I completely follow there, but I think that he has adjusted his offense several times during the course of being the coach with several different quarterbacks, and we could see it happening in real time with Kyler Murray. I think it's just been that when it comes to the play call, well, one, that he wanted JJ McCarthy to run the offense, the complete offense, which I don't think was too much to ask. But then when he realized that he couldn't, then, he adjusted it and they played better. But when McCarthy was that inaccurate and struggling so much, there's no adjustment you can make. I think that some of the gripping onto KOC can't adjust is gripping onto McCarthy's actually not at fault. I think that's what a lot of that really is, because he adapted it for Sam Darnold to throw down the field more. He adapted it for Kirk Cousins in 23 to have a much shorter average depth of target and take advantage of the space underneath with TJ Hawkinson. And I think some of it is frustration over the kind of overcommitment to downfield stuff that's gotten a lot of quarterbacks hit. Now, that's an area that, you do have to adjust and adapt, is the amount of quarterback hits that you're taking And some of these injuries, it might not just be, oh, well, his quarterbacks have just been unlucky. Some of it is you're one of the highest quarterback hits and sacks over the last few years. So, I mean, but yeah, when we talk about the actual, I mean, so first name, last name, we say most quarterback get a basic offense and gradually layer stuff in, but McCarthy was in his second year, had known the offense. And look at the names that you threw out there. Hall, McCarthy, Dobbs, Brosmer. I mean, these are the names. So, Super Rod, do you think KOC regrets winning extra games and not getting Drake May? Probably every day of his life. Yeah. Hey, look, I've talked about tanking a lot over my career here, but yeah. Yep. I would guess every single day. Yeah. After watching the way Drake May played last year. Sneedley, not, but you can never ask a coach not to win. It's the front office that should trade Danielle Hunter at that time and not get Josh Dobbs, who could accidentally fall into a win. But, really the mistake is bringing back Kirk in 2023. They were revamping and overhauling the entire rest of the roster, and they bring back Kirk. You could have played anybody there, won 3 or 4 games. That was really the mistake. Yeah, I agree, Sneedley. There's not that many players out there at Dallas Turner's age. And so it may not all be flawless and he gets 15 sacks this year, but usually players who are taken in the middle of the first round that are as young as Dallas Turner do need time. And that's what we've seen, just consistent progress. All right, tomorrow I'm expecting a hard practice and I am expecting to bring you guys the official vibe check of every position tomorrow. That is the plan, and we will see if anything else pops up. If anything else comes up, like a practice squad guy getting arrested and being suspended, then we'll talk about that as well. So anyway, thanks for everybody's time. Really appreciate you all tuning in. I cannot wait till we get into our regular season mode. These shows have been really fun. I've had a great time doing them. But when we get into regular season mode, it is just so much fun. Roundtables, Manny Hill, Jeremiah Searles, everybody's going to be back. That is right around the corner. So we'll have some more guests and stuff coming your way, but I cannot wait to get to that point of the season. So thanks again for watching. Another practice tomorrow, then another preseason game, and then cut down day, and then football is almost here. Take care, everybody. Football.